A man stood at the edge of his own ghost story, staring at smoke rising from a chimney that should have been cold ashes. 5 years ago, Elias Boone had abandoned this ranch to rot, left it to silence and ruin after fire took everything he loved. Now a county notice said strangers would auction it off in days. He'd ridden back expecting graves and decay. Instead, he found gardens, laughter, life blooming where death should have ruled. And standing in his doorway was a woman who had no idea she'd rebuilt her world on land that didn't belong to her. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes. Elias Boone had learned that truth the hard way, carved it into his bones during 5 years of drifting through railroad towns and mining camps where nobody asked your name and nobody cared about the weight you carried. He'd worked timber crews in Oregon, mucked stalls in Nevada, and spent one brutal winter breaking ice off cattle troughs in Wyoming. Always moving, always running, always making sure the silence behind him stayed buried. Now the silence had caught up. The county notice was 3 weeks old by the time it found him, wrinkled and stained from passing through 4 different post offices before a clerk in Timber Ridge recognized the name. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Notice of tax delinquency and pending auction. The words blurred together, but the meaning cut clean. Pay what's owed or lose the last piece of ground that still remembered his name. Elias had stood outside that post office for 20 minutes, the notice trembling in his hand, while miners and freight wagons rolled past, and the world kept moving like his entire life wasn't folding in on itself. He should have let it go, should have crumpled the paper and walked away. The ranch had been dead to him for 5 years. Burned ground and bad memories, nothing worth the ride back through the Bitterroot Range. But something deeper than logic pulled at him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the stubborn part of his father's blood that refused to let strangers pick over bones that belonged to his family. Maybe it was just that he had nowhere else left to lose. 3 days later, he was riding into country he'd sworn never to see again. The trail climbed through pine forests that smelled like resin and old snow. His horse, a sturdy roan mare he'd bought off a ranch hand in Montana, picked her way over roots and stone without complaint. Elias barely registered the beauty around him. Every mile brought him closer to a place that should have stayed buried, and the dread in his chest grew heavier with each ridge crossed. He'd left in winter. Now it was late summer, and the land looked different, greener, softer, like time had tried to heal what fire and grief had torn apart. But Elias knew better. Some wounds didn't close. Some places stayed broken no matter how many years passed. By the second afternoon, the peaks looked familiar. He recognized the crooked fir tree struck by lightning, the boulder shaped like a crouching bear, the creek that ran loud and cold even in August. His hands tightened on the reins. Another hour, maybe 2, and he'd see what remained. He expected ruins, charred timbers, collapsed roof lines, maybe a few stone walls still standing like grave markers. He'd prepared himself for that, steeled his mind against the sight of a place reduced to ash and regret. What he hadn't prepared for was smoke. Elias pulled the roan to a stop at the top of the final ridge and stared down into the valley that had once been his. Smoke rose thin and gray from a chimney. His chimney. The cabin stood whole, not burned, not collapsed. Whole. The logs looked weathered but solid, the roof patched with newer shingles that caught the afternoon light. Beside the house, a garden stretched green and wild. Rows of beans climbing wooden stakes, squash vines sprawling across turned earth, sunflowers taller than a man nodding heavy heads toward the sun. Elias's breath stopped. Fences ran straight along the pasture. A barn door hung square on its hinges. Chickens scratched near a coop that hadn't existed 5 years ago. And in the yard, white sheets flapped on a clothesline strung between 2 posts, snapping in the breeze like flags claiming territory. Someone lived here. Someone had taken his dead ranch and brought it back to life. The realization hit him like a fist to the ribs. For a long moment, Elias just sat there on the ridge, the county notice folded in his coat pocket, the deed to this land pressed against his heart, while his mind tried to make sense of what his eyes were showing him. Then he heard the laughter. High and bright, a child's voice carried across the valley, followed by a deeper sound, a woman calling something he couldn't make out. The normalcy of it twisted something inside him. This was supposed to be a graveyard. Instead, it was someone's home. Elias urged the roan forward, descending the ridge slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. As he drew closer, details sharpened. The garden wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, carefully tended, with rows marked by stones and pathways worn smooth by foot traffic. The cabin's windows gleamed clean. A new porch rail ran along the front, and Boots sat neatly beside the door, caked with dried mud. He dismounted near the barn, tying the roan to a post that looked newer than the structure itself. His boots hit the ground and the sound felt too loud, too real. He was trespassing on his own property, and the absurdity of that thought almost made him laugh. Almost. Before he could decide what to do next, the cabin door opened. A woman stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron. She was tall and broad-shouldered, built strong in the way frontier women got when survival depended on their own two hands. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her face, sun-browned and sharp-featured, held the kind of wariness that came from living alone in hard country. She looked at him the way you'd look at a wolf circling the perimeter, calm but ready. "Help you?" Her voice was steady, neither friendly nor hostile. "Just careful." Elias took off his hat. Old manners, buried under years of drifting, surfaced without thought. "Ma'am, didn't mean to startle you. I was passing through and saw the smoke. Thought I might ask for water and a place to rest my horse." It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. Just not the whole truth. The woman studied him for a long moment, her eyes moving from his worn boots to the dust on his coat to the tired set of his shoulders. Whatever she saw must have passed some internal test, because her posture relaxed a fraction. "Well's around back," she said. "You can water your horse there. I'll bring out a dipper." "Appreciate it." She disappeared inside, and Elias stood alone in the yard, trying not to look at the place too hard, trying not to remember the last time he'd stood here, when the ground was covered in snow and the silence had been so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. He led the roan to the well, a stone structure he'd built with his father 20 years ago. The bucket was new, the rope strong. He hauled up cold, clear water and let the mare drink while his hands moved through the motions automatically, his mind elsewhere. This was wrong. All of it. He should tell her, should pull out the deed right now and explain that this land, this house, this life she'd built, it all belonged to him. That in 3 days the county would auction it off unless he paid what was owed, and she'd have no claim, no right, no... She drinks like she's been traveling a while. Elias turned. The woman had returned, a tin cup in her hand. Up close, she looked older than he'd first thought. Maybe 30, maybe more. Hard to tell. The frontier aged people in ways that didn't always show in lines and gray hair. It showed in the way they held themselves, in the flatness behind their eyes when they looked at strangers. 3 days hard, Elias said, taking the offered cup. Coming down from Montana. Long ride. She didn't ask why. Another frontier courtesy, people's business was their own. You got a name? He hesitated for half a breath. Elias? Mara. She crossed her arms, not unfriendly, just self-contained. You looking for work or just passing through? The question caught him off guard. Passing through. Shame. Could use a hand mending the fence line before winter. Deer keep pushing through near the north pasture. She glanced at the sun, calculating something. You eaten today? Elias blinked. No, ma'am, not since morning. Then you'll stay for supper, not much, but it's hot. She said it like a statement, not an invitation. You can bed down in the barn after. Ground's too cold to sleep rough this high up, even in summer. Every instinct told him to refuse. To make an excuse, ride out, come back in 3 days with the county papers and handle this like a transaction instead of a betrayal. But his stomach was empty, his horse was tired, and something about the way this woman offered hospitality, simple and direct, without expectation, made it impossible to say no. That's kind of you. Mara shrugged. Frontier code. You feed travelers, they move on. World keeps turning. She turned back toward the house, then paused. Fair warning, my daughter's 5 and asks a lot of questions, and the ram doesn't like strangers. Ram? As if summoned, an enormous shape rounded the corner of the barn. The animal was massive, easily 200 pounds of muscle and wool, with curved horns that could punch through a fence board. It stopped when it saw Elias, lowering its head in a way that was unmistakably a threat. "That's Solomon," Mara said, utterly unconcerned. "He's protective. Just don't make sudden moves and you'll be fine." A small figure appeared behind the ram, a little girl with tangled brown hair and a dirt-smudged face, wearing a dress that had been mended so many times the original fabric was hard to identify. She peered at Elias with the kind of fearless curiosity only children possessed. "Mama, who's that?" "Traveler," Mara said. "Name's Elias. He's staying for supper." The girl stepped around Solomon, completely unafraid of the animal that looked like it could trample a grown man. "I'm Elsie. That's Solomon. He's my friend." She said it with absolute certainty, the way children stated facts about the world. "Are you a cowboy?" "Elsie," Mara's tone held a gentle warning. "Let the man breathe." "It's all right," Elias said, though his throat felt tight. The girl was about the same age his son would have been, if his son had lived. "I've worked cattle some. Don't know if that makes me a cowboy." "Do you got a gun?" "Elsie." "I'm just asking." The girl's eyes were bright with interest. "Solomon wants to know too." The ram made a sound that could have been agreement or indigestion, hard to tell. Mara sighed. "Come on, Trouble. Let's get supper started. You can interrogate our guest at the table." She looked at Elias. "Barn's open. Settle your horse, then come inside. We eat when the sun touches the ridge." She herded Elsie toward the house, the little girl chattering about something involving Solomon and a possum she'd seen that morning. The ram followed, casting one last suspicious look at Elias before trotting after his charges like a woolly guardian. Elias stood alone in the yard, the tin cup still in his hand, watching this strange little family disappear into the house that used to be his. The house he'd built with his father, the house where his wife had died, the house he'd abandoned to rot. He should leave, should mount up and ride back down the mountain and let the county handle this mess. But his feet carried him to the barn instead, and he found himself unsaddling the roan in a building that smelled like hay and leather and old wood, everything familiar and foreign at the same time. The barn was different, cleaner. Someone had mucked the stalls recently, restacked the hay, patched holes in the walls where weather had gotten through. Tools hung on pegs, some he recognized, some new. A workbench held a lantern, a jar of nails, a child's drawing of what might have been a horse or possibly a very ambitious dog. Elias ran his hand along a support beam, feeling the grain under his palm. His father had hewn this timber. He remembered helping, remembered the ache in his 12-year-old arms as they'd hauled it into place. That was 30 years ago, back when the ranch was new and the future looked wide open. Now he was 42, alone, and standing in a barn that belonged to him in name only. The sun was touching the ridge when he finally walked to the house. Mara had left the door ajar. Warm light spilled out, and the smell of cooking meat made his stomach clench with sudden hunger. He knocked anyway, waiting. "It's open," Mara's voice came from inside. Elias stepped into a room that stopped his heart. The cabin looked nothing like he remembered. Where there had been sparse furniture and cold practicality, there was now warmth. Quilts hung on the walls, bright patterns that caught the lamplight. The table was set with mismatched plates. Wildflowers sat in a jar at the center. A shelf held books, a few tin cups, a carved wooden horse that looked handmade. And everywhere were the small signs of a child's presence. Drawings pinned to the wall, a rag doll sitting in a chair, wooden blocks stacked in the corner. The life that filled this space was so complete, so real, that it felt like a physical weight pressing on Elias's chest. This was a home. Not his home. Not anymore. Maybe never again. "Sit." Mara gestured to the table without looking up from the stove. "Elsie, wash your hands." "But they're not dirty." "They're always dirty. Go." The little girl huffed but obeyed, climbing onto a stool near the wash basin and scrubbing her hands with soap while Solomon watched from his position near the door. The ram had sprawled across the threshold like a furry boulder, clearly intending to monitor Elias's every move. Elias sat carefully, feeling like an intruder at someone else's supper table, which, in a way, he was. Mara brought the food over. Roasted rabbit, boiled potatoes, beans from the garden. Simple fare, but more than Elias had eaten in a proper meal for months. She served Elsie first, then Elias, then herself, moving with the efficient grace of someone used to managing a household alone. "We don't say grace," Mara said, settling into her chair. "If that bothers you, feel free to pray silent." "Doesn't bother me," Elias said. "Good, eat." For a few minutes, the only sound was forks on plates and the crackle of the fire. Elsie swung her legs under the table, watching Elias with unabashed curiosity between bites. "Where are you from?" she asked finally. "Elsie, let the man eat." "You said I could ask questions at the table," Mara sighed. "I did say that." She looked at Elias. "You don't have to answer." "It's all right." Elias took a drink of water, buying time. "I'm from a lot of places, been moving around for a while." "How come?" The question was innocent, but it landed like a stone in deep water. Elias set down his cup carefully. "Sometimes people need to keep moving, that's all." Elsie frowned, considering this. "Mama says we're staying forever. Right, Mama?" "That's right," Mara said quietly. Her eyes met Elias's across the table, and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, that both of them carried histories they didn't speak about. "This is good," Elias said, gesturing to his plate. "Thank you." "Rabbit's plentiful this year. Solomon helped me catch this one." Elsie giggled. "Solomon doesn't catch rabbits. He just stands there and looks scary." "Fear is a tool," Mara said mildly. "Rabbit got so scared it ran right into my snare." The little girl dissolved into laughter, and even Elias felt his mouth twitch. The easy rhythm of their conversation, the way Mara deflected her daughter's energy without diminishing it, spoke of years of practice, years of just the two of them, making a life in this isolated valley. "How long have you been here?" Elias asked before he could stop himself. Mara's expression shuddered slightly. "Coming up on 5 years." 5 years. The same amount of time he'd been gone. The coincidence made his skin prickle. "Must have been hard starting up a place like this." "Hard's relative." Mara cut a potato with more force than necessary. "You do what needs doing, or you don't survive. Simple as that." "Mama fixed everything herself," Elsie announced proudly. "The roof and the fences and the barn door and—" "Elsie! What you did!" Mara's jaw tightened. "Eat your supper." Elias looked around the cabin again, seeing it differently now. Every repair, every improvement, every sign of care. Mara had done it. Alone. While raising a child. In country that broke strong men. The weight in his chest grew heavier. "The ranch," he said carefully. "How'd you come to be here?" The silence that fell was sharp enough to cut. Mara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Elsie looked between them, sensing the shift in temperature. "That's a long story," Mara said finally, "and not one I share with strangers." The rebuke was gentle but firm. Elias nodded, backing off. "Understood. Didn't mean to pry." "Mama was lost," Elsie said, ignoring her mother's warning look. "She found the house, and it was all broken, and she fixed it, and now it's ours." "Elsie. And I was in her belly." The girl patted her stomach. "But now I'm out here." Despite everything, Elias almost smiled. "That's so." "Elsie, that's enough." Mara's voice held a note of finality. "Finish your food." The rest of the meal passed in relative quiet. Elsie chattered about Solomon and the chickens and a bird's nest she'd found, while Mara responded with the patience of someone who'd answered the same questions 1,000 times. Elias ate slowly, absorbing the strange comfort of sitting at a table with other people, something he hadn't done in years. When the plates were empty, Mara stood. "Elsie, take the scraps out to the chickens." "Can Elias come?" "Elias needs to rest. He's had a long ride." The little girl looked disappointed but obeyed, gathering the scraps into a bowl and heading outside with Solomon plodding after her like a loyal shadow. Alone with Mara, the cabin felt smaller. She began clearing plates, her movements brisk and efficient. Elias stood to help, but she waved him off. "You're a guest. Sit." "I don't mind helping." "I mind. Sit." He sat. Mara worked in silence for a moment, scraping plates into a bucket, wiping down the table. Then she spoke without turning around. "You're running from something." It wasn't a question. Elias's hands tightened on his knees. "What makes you say that?" "Man travels 3 days hard and doesn't have a destination? Man accepts charity from strangers without asking questions first?" She glanced over her shoulder. You're either running from something or running towards something you don't want to admit. Maybe both. Maybe. Mara turned back to her work. Not my business either way. But if you're trouble, I need to know now. I got a daughter to protect. I'm not trouble. Everyone's trouble to someone. Elias couldn't argue with that. I won't bring harm to you or your girl. You have my word. Mara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I believe you. She dried her hands on her apron. Barn's got clean hay in the left stall. There's extra blankets in the chest if you need them. We rise early. Sun's up. We're working. Understood. He stood, putting his hat back on. At the door, he paused. Thank you for the meal, for the hospitality. Like I said, frontier code. But her expression softened slightly. You need anything? Just knock. And watch out for Solomon. He patrols at night. Elias stepped out into the cooling evening. The sun had set behind the mountains, leaving the valley in deep blue twilight. Stars were beginning to appear, bright and cold. Elsie was at the chicken coop, talking to the birds like they could understand her, while Solomon stood guard nearby. The scene was so ordinary, so peaceful, that it felt like a knife twisting in Elias's gut. He'd built this place to be a home. Then he'd let it die. And now someone else had brought it back to life without even knowing its history, without knowing that every nail in these walls had been driven by hands that were now dust. In the barn, Elias spread his bedroll in the stall Mara had indicated. The hay smelled sweet. The blanket from the chest smelled like lavender and wood smoke. Outside, he could hear Elsie's voice growing distant as Mara called her inside for bed. Elias lay in the dark, staring at rafters he'd helped build, and pulled the county notice from his pocket. Even in the dim light filtering through the cracks, he could make out the words. 3 days. 3 days to pay the debt or lose everything. But what was he losing exactly? The land? He'd already lost that 5 years ago when he turned his back and walked away. The house? It belonged to Mara now in every way that mattered. The memories? Those had burned the night his family died, and no amount of legal paperwork would bring them back. His hand moved to his other pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper even older than the county notice. The deed. The proof that this land was his by law, his by blood, his by a legacy that stretched back to his father and his father's father. Worth nothing compared to the life blooming here now. Elias folded both papers and tucked them away. Tomorrow he'd figure out what to do. Tomorrow he'd decide whether to speak the truth or keep running. But tonight he lay in a barn that remembered him, in a valley that had learned to live without him, and listened to the sounds of a family settling in for the night. A door closing. A child's voice asking one more question. A woman's patient answer. Silence. For the first time in 5 years, Elias Boone fell asleep on his own land. And for the first time in 5 years, he didn't dream of fire. He woke to the sound of an axe biting wood. Elias sat up, disoriented, before remembering where he was. Pale dawn light filtered through the barn walls. Outside, the steady rhythm of chopping continued. Clean strikes, confident, practiced. He rolled up his bedding and stepped into the morning. The air was cold enough to see his breath. Frost silvered the grass, and beside the woodpile, Mara was splitting logs with the kind of efficient strength that came from doing it every day for years. She didn't look up when he approached. Just set another log, swung the axe, split it clean, tossed the pieces onto the pile. Her breath puffed white in the cold air. Coffee's in the house, she said between swings. Elsie's still sleeping. Need help? Can you swing an axe? Yes, ma'am. Mara stepped back, gesturing to the pile. Have at it. Elias picked up the axe, feeling the familiar weight. He set a log, measured the distance, swung. The blade bit deep, splitting the wood with a satisfying crack. He worked through several more, falling into the rhythm his body remembered, even if his mind had tried to forget. When he paused to catch his breath, Mara was watching him with an appraising look. You've done this before. Grew up doing it. Where? The question was casual, but Elias felt the trap in it. Montana, he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. He'd spent time there, just not recently. Mara nodded, accepting this. Wood needs to be stacked before the snow comes. I've been behind on it. She pulled off her gloves. You staying another day? Elias should say no, should make an excuse about needing to move on. But the words that came out were different. If you've got work, I can stay a bit, pay back the hospitality. Something flickered in Mara's expression. Relief, maybe, or just pragmatic satisfaction. Fair trade. Fences need mending on the north pasture, barn doors hanging crooked, and the chicken coop's got a hole some fox has been eyeing. I can handle that. Then we got a deal. She held out her hand. Elias shook it. Her grip was strong, calloused, the handshake of someone who'd learned not to trust weakness. One more thing, Mara said, not letting go. Elsie gets attached easy. Don't make promises you can't keep. I won't. She held his gaze a moment longer, then released his hand and headed toward the house. I'll get breakfast started. Work begins after. Elias watched her go, then looked down at his hand, still tingling from the grip, still warm from the contact. This was a mistake. Every instinct screamed it. He should tell her the truth now before things got more complicated. But the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold, and the ranch looked so alive in the morning light that Elias couldn't bring himself to destroy it. Not yet. Just a few more days, he told himself. Just enough time to figure out how to do this without crushing the woman who'd rebuilt his world from ashes. Just a few more days of pretending he was someone else. Someone who hadn't failed everyone he'd ever loved. Inside the cabin, he heard Elsie's voice rise in excitement, probably spotting him through the window. Solomon bleated from somewhere near the barn, and Mara called out that breakfast was ready, her voice carrying across the yard like it belonged there. Elias hung the axe on its hook and walked toward the house, the deed burning in his pocket like a brand against his ribs. He was home, but it wasn't his home anymore. And the worst part was, he was starting to think that might be exactly how it should be. The fence line ran crooked across the north pasture, leaning in places where deer had pushed through and winter had done the rest. Elias walked it slowly that first morning, testing each post, marking the worst sections in his mind. The work was familiar, the kind of labor that let your hands move while your thoughts wandered elsewhere. Behind him, Elsie trailed along with Solomon, narrating everything she saw to the ram like he was taking notes. That one's really broke, she announced, pointing at a post that had rotted clean through at the base. Mama tried to fix it, but it fell over again. I see that. Elias knelt beside the damaged section, examining the wood. This whole stretch needs replacing. Are you going to fix it? That's the plan. Mama says plans change a lot. Elias glanced back at the girl. She was watching him with those unnervingly direct eyes that children had, the kind that saw straight through pretense. Solomon stood beside her, chewing cud and looking equally skeptical. Your mama's right, Elias said. But I'll fix what I can while I'm here. How long's that? Don't know yet. Elsie considered this, then shrugged like it was answer enough. She wandered off to investigate a cluster of wildflowers, talking to Solomon about butterflies and whether rams could see colors. The animal followed her patiently, occasionally butting her hand when she stopped petting him. Elias returned to the house for tools and found Mara in the garden, kneeling between rows of beans with dirt caked under her fingernails. She looked up when his shadow fell across her work. Fence? Needs new posts on the north side, maybe a dozen. You got timber? Some. Check the back of the barn. She sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. If there's not enough, there's fallen trees up the ridge. You'll need the saw. I'll make do with what's here first. Mara nodded and returned to her work, pulling weeds with quick, efficient movements. Elias started to leave, then paused. How'd you learn all this? The question came out before he could stop it. The fences, the garden, the carpentry? Mara didn't look up. Necessity. You either figure it out or you starve. Her tone didn't invite further questions. Elias took the hint and headed to the barn. The timber was there, stacked against the back wall. Not much, but enough to get started. As he loaded posts onto his shoulder, his eyes caught on something else. A small wooden cross, half hidden behind a coil of rope. It was rough made, the kind you'd carve in an hour with a knife and some scrap wood. A grave marker. Elias's chest tightened. He'd buried his wife and son up on the hill overlooking the valley, marked their resting place with stones because his hands had been shaking too hard to carve anything better. He'd left those graves behind when he ran, left them to weather and silence. This cross was different, newer, someone else's grief. He pulled his gaze away and carried the timber outside. The work swallowed the morning. Elias dug out rotted posts, tamped new ones into holes filled with rocks and dirt, stretched wire tight and straight. His muscles remembered the rhythm even if they protested the effort. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cool air. His hands blistered, then calloused over. Elsie appeared periodically with updates. The chickens had laid 4 eggs. Solomon had chased a fox. Mama was making bread. Each announcement was delivered with the seriousness of someone reporting vital intelligence, and each time Elias nodded like he understood the gravity. Around midday, Mara brought him water and a hunk of bread with butter. "You don't have to push so hard," she said, watching him work. "Fence'll still be there tomorrow." Habit. Elias took the water gratefully, drinking half in one pull. "I work. I don't think so much." "What are you trying not to think about?" The question was asked casually, but Elias heard the weight behind it. He set down the dipper carefully. "Same things most people try not to think about, I guess. Past mistakes. People you let down." Mara was quiet for a moment. "That's a heavy load to carry alone." "Gets lighter when you keep moving. Or heavier." She picked up the empty dipper. "Lunch is in an hour. Don't work yourself into the ground before then." She walked back toward the house, leaving Elias standing in the pasture with dirt on his hands and questions in his throat he couldn't ask. That night at supper, Elsie asked if he knew any stories. "Elsie," Mara warned, but there was no real heat in it. "What? Mama's stories are all about vegetables and chickens? They're boring." "They are not boring. Last night I told you about the clever hen who—" "That one was boring too," Elsie said, with the brutal honesty of children everywhere. Mara looked at Elias, half apologetic and half amused. "You don't have to," but Elias surprised himself by speaking. "I know one. About a ram, actually." Elsie sat up straighter. "Really? Really? But it's not a happy story." "That's okay. Happy stories are boring." "Elsie!" Elias almost smiled. "This ram lived up in the mountains, meaner than a winter storm. Had horns like tree branches and a temper to match. Nobody could get near him. Not the ranchers, not their dogs, nobody." Elsie leaned forward, hooked. Solomon, lying by the fire, cracked one eye open like he was listening too. One day a little girl got lost in the mountains. Snow was coming, and she couldn't find her way home. Just when she thought she'd freeze, she saw the ram standing on a ridge. And instead of running, she walked right up to him. Wasn't she scared? Terrified. But she was more scared of dying alone in the snow. Elias took a drink of water, aware that Mara had stopped eating and was watching him. The ram could have charged her, could have left her there. But something in the way she looked at him, like she trusted him even though she had no reason to, made him stay. He led her down the mountain, broke trail through the snow, and got her home safe. And then what? Then nothing. The ram went back to his mountain. The girl grew up. But she never forgot that sometimes the meanest-looking things are just protecting something they lost. The cabin was quiet except for the fire crackling. Elsie's eyes were wide. "Is that a true story?" "True enough." Mara's expression had gone unreadable. She stood abruptly, gathering plates. "Bedtime, Elsie." "But now." The girl recognized the tone and obeyed, though she cast one last curious look at Elias before heading to the small room off the main cabin. Solomon heaved himself up and followed, settling across the doorway like a woolly guard. Alone with Mara again, Elias felt the air shift. "That story," she said quietly, scrubbing a plate harder than necessary. "Where'd you hear it?" "Made it up." "No, you didn't." She turned to face him. "You lived it. Which part were you, the ram or the girl?" Elias stood, reaching for his hat. "I should check on my horse." "You're running again." "I'm giving you space." "I didn't ask for space. I asked a question." He stopped at the door, hand on the frame. "Both," he said finally. "I was both. The thing protecting what it lost, and the thing that needed saving." Mara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "We've all got parts we're running from. Doesn't mean you have to keep running." Elias didn't answer. He stepped out into the night, closing the door gently behind him. The days folded into each other after that. Elias fixed the fence, rehung the barn door, patched the chicken coop. Each evening he told himself he'd leave in the morning, and each morning he found another task that needed doing. The county deadline crept closer. 2 days left, then 1.5. But he kept working, kept pretending he was just a drifter earning his keep. It was easier than facing what came next. On the fourth morning, everything changed. Elias was in the garden, helping Elsie harvest beans. The girl insisted she needed help reaching the high vines, though he suspected she just liked having someone new to talk at. They worked down the rows, filling baskets while Solomon supervised from the shade. That's when Elsie's hand went to her neck, fidgeting with something beneath her collar. "Stop that," Elias said absently. "You'll break the chain." "I won't." But she pulled it out anyway, holding it up to examine in the sunlight. Elias's world stopped. The locket was small, gold, heart-shaped. Tarnished now, the delicate engraving worn smooth in places. But he'd know it anywhere. He'd bought it in a trading post 15 years ago, saved 3 months' wages to afford it, and given it to his wife the day they married. She'd worn it every day until the night she died. He'd buried it with her. "Where did you get that?" His voice came out wrong, too sharp, too raw. Elsie looked up, startled by his tone. "I found it." "Where?" "In the garden. Last spring when Mama was turning soil." She held it out like an offering. "It's real pretty, huh? Mama said I could keep it if nobody claimed it." Elias couldn't breathe. His hands were shaking. The garden tilted around him. The locket had been buried on the hill. In the grave. How was it here? In the garden, around this child's neck. Unless the grave had been disturbed. Unless someone had dug there. Unless the fire and the chaos afterward had scattered more than just ashes. Or unless he was losing his mind and this was a different locket, a coincidence, nothing more than... "Elias?" Elsie's voice sounded far away. "Are you okay?" He forced himself to breathe, forced his hands to stop shaking. "I'm fine. It's real pretty. You should take care of it." But his eyes couldn't leave the locket, and Elsie noticed. "You want to hold it?" "No." The word came out too fast. "No, that's yours. You found it fair." Elsie tucked it back beneath her collar, satisfied, and returned to picking beans. She chattered about something else, Solomon's breakfast, a bird she'd seen. But Elias didn't hear any of it. The roaring in his ears drowned out everything else. That night he couldn't eat, couldn't sit still. Mara noticed but didn't pry, just watched him with those careful eyes while Elsie filled the silence with stories about her day. After the girl went to bed, Mara poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of Elias. "Whatever's eating at you, spit it out before it kills you." Elias wrapped his hands around the cup, needing something to hold on to. "That locket Elsie wears. You said she found it in the garden. Last spring. Why?" "I just..." He stopped, recalibrated. It looked familiar. Mara's eyes narrowed. "How familiar?" "I've seen one like it before. Long time ago." "And?" "And nothing. Just caught me off guard." She didn't believe him. He could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way her fingers tapped against her cup. But she didn't push, just took a long drink of coffee and stared into the fire. "This place has ghosts," she said finally. "I felt them since I got here. Sometimes I think that's why nobody came back for it. Too many memories buried in the ground." Elias's throat closed. "Maybe. You feel them too, the ghosts." It wasn't a question. "Yeah, I feel them." They sat in silence after that, 2 people carrying weight they couldn't share, drinking coffee that had gone cold. The next morning, Elias woke to voices outside the barn. He emerged to find a man on horseback, thick-built, 50s, with the kind of face that looked mean even when it smiled. He was talking to Mara, who stood with her arms crossed, her posture rigid. "Just saying you could do better than breaking your back alone out here," the man was saying. "A woman in your position, you need protection." "I'm fine, Waylon." "You ain't fine. You're barely scraping by." His eyes raked over the ranch with obvious disdain. "This place is falling apart. It's standing. That's enough. For now." Waylon shifted in his saddle, and that's when he noticed Elias. His expression curdled. "Who's this?" "Hand I hired," Mara said smoothly. "Helping with repairs." "With what money?" "My money. My business." Waylon's jaw worked. "Everything about you is my business, Mara. We're family." "You're my dead husband's cousin. That doesn't make us family." The words hung in the air like a slap. Elias felt something shift in his understanding. Dead husband, Mara had said. Not missing, not gone. Dead. Waylon's face darkened. You watch your mouth. I got legal standing where that girl's concerned. You remember that. You got nothing. Elsie's mine. For now. Waylon smiled, and it was ugly. But a woman alone, no husband, barely making ends meet? Judge might see things different, might see a child who'd be better off with proper family. Mara's hands curled into fists. Get off my land! Your land! Waylon laughed. You don't own nothing here, Mara. You're squatting on property that ain't yours, and we both know it. One of these days, the real owner's gonna come back, and where you gonna be then? Elias stepped forward before he could think. The lady asked you to leave. Waylon turned his attention to him, eyes calculating. This ain't your fight, Drifter. Maybe not, but I'm making it mine. For a moment, tension stretched tight enough to snap. Then Waylon spat into the dirt and yanked his horse around. This ain't over, Mara. You need money. You know where to find me. And when you can't pay what you owe, we'll talk about Elsie's future. He rode off, leaving dust and menace in his wake. Mara stood rigid, her breathing harsh. Elias could see her fighting to keep control, to not let the fear show. It reminded him of a horse about to bolt, all that energy coiled tight, looking for a way out. Mara, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. But Elsie had appeared in the doorway, Solomon beside her, and the look on the little girl's face said she'd heard enough. Is Uncle Waylon going to take me away? Mara's expression cracked. She crossed to her daughter in 3 strides and pulled her close. No, baby, nobody's taking you anywhere. But he said, he's mean and he lies. You're staying right here with me and Solomon, always. She pressed her face into Elsie's hair, and Elias could see her shoulders shaking. He turned away, giving them privacy, but the rage burning in his chest wasn't something he could walk off. Waylon. Threats against a child. Legal claims on land that belonged to Elias. The realization hit like cold water. This ranch was his. The deed was in his pocket. One word from him and Waylon's threats would crumble. One trip to the county office and Mara's position would be secure, assuming he what? Gave her the land? Sold it to her for nothing? Made her a partner in property she'd rebuilt with her own hands? Every option felt like another betrayal. That afternoon, a different visitor arrived. This one was older, a weathered rancher from 3 valleys over named Thomas Brennan. He rode up respectful, called out before approaching, and smiled when Mara emerged from the house. Mara, good to see you. Tom, her voice was friendly but guarded. What brings you out this way? Just checking in. Wanted to see how you fared through the summer. His eyes drifted to Elias, curious but not hostile. You got help now? Temporary. Elias, this is Tom Brennan. Tom, Elias is doing some fence work. They nodded at each other, taking measure. Tom had the look of a man who'd worked land his whole life and understood its costs. That's good, Tom said. Place looks better every time I ride by. You're doing fine work here. Mara's posture softened slightly. Thanks. We're managing. More than managing. Tom dismounted, pulling a wrapped bundle from his saddlebag. Wife sent preserves. Said you helped deliver her sister's baby last spring, and we never properly thanked you. That wasn't necessary. Wife disagrees. You know how that goes. He handed over the bundle with a grin. Also wanted to give you warning. There's talk in town about Waylon. Mara's face went still. What kind of talk? The kind that says he's been asking questions about your claim to this place. About whether you got papers, legal standing. Tom's expression turned serious. I don't trust him, Mara. Never have. Man's got eyes like a snake watching chickens. I know what he is. Then you know to be careful. He gets it in his head that he can make money off something. He don't let go easy. Tom glanced at the ranch, then back at her. You got any claim at all to this land? Anything written? Mara's silence was answer enough. Tom sighed. That's what I was afraid of. Look, if you need someone to stand for you with the county, you let me know. My family's been here 40 years. We got weight with the officials. I appreciate that, Tom. I do. But you're too proud to ask for help. It wasn't a criticism, just a statement of fact. I get it, but pride don't stop men like Waylon when they smell opportunity. After Tom left, Mara stood in the yard holding the preserves and staring at nothing. Elsie had gone back inside with Solomon, leaving the two adults alone. "How long's he been threatening you?" Elias asked quietly. "Since I got here." Mara set the preserves on the porch rail. "First, it was offering to marry me, make things proper. When I said no, it was offers to buy the land. When I said I didn't own it, he started talking about Elsie, about how a bastard child with no father needed proper family." "And the husband he mentioned?" Mara's laugh was bitter. "There wasn't one. Elsie's father was a ranch hand who made promises and disappeared when I told him I was pregnant. Waylon's just a distant relative who decided that gave him rights." "It doesn't. Tell that to a judge who sees an unwed mother squatting on abandoned land." She turned to face him. "I know how this looks, Elias. I'm not naive. I got no papers, no claim, nothing but 5 years of sweat and stubbornness. Legally, I got no ground to stand on." Elias's hand went to his pocket, feeling the deed there. 3 words, and he could fix this. 3 words, and Mara would know he'd lied from the start. 3 words, and he'd destroy what little trust she had left. "There's got to be something," he said instead. "Squatters' rights, adverse possession. Takes longer than 5 years in this territory. I checked." Mara wrapped her arms around herself. "I knew this was coming. I just hoped I'd have more time. Hoped maybe nobody would care about one woman and a child living on dead land." "This land isn't dead. To the law it is. To anyone with a legal claim, I'm just trespassing." She met his eyes. "You asked why I learned to do everything myself. This is why. Because I knew from the start I was living on borrowed time, and I couldn't afford to depend on anyone but myself." Elias wanted to tell her, wanted to pull out the deed right then and make everything clear. But the words stuck in his throat, tangled up with guilt and fear and the terrible knowledge that honesty now would hurt worse than any lie. "We'll figure something out," he said, and hated how empty it sounded. "Will we?" Mara's smile was sad. "You're a good man, Elias, but you're still running from whatever you left behind. And men who are running don't stick around long enough to fix other people's problems." She went inside, leaving him alone in the yard with the truth burning a hole in his pocket. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He lay in the barn staring at rafters and listening to the ranch settle around him. Somewhere nearby, an owl called. The horses shifted in their stalls. And in the house, a lamp stayed lit far later than usual. Mara, probably, sitting up worrying about futures she couldn't control. He pulled out the deed and the county notice, spreading them on the hay beside him. The auction was tomorrow. If he didn't show up, didn't pay the debt, the county would sell to whoever bid highest. Probably Waylon, if the man had been sniffing around asking questions. And if Waylon owned the land, Mara and Elsie would be out by winter. But if Elias paid the debt, claimed the property, then what? He couldn't just hand it over. There'd be questions, investigations, legal complications that would expose Mara's tenuous position. He couldn't sell it to her for nothing without raising suspicion. And he sure as hell couldn't live here pretending to be someone he wasn't, while Mara and Elsie built a life on a foundation of his lies. Every path led to pain. Elias closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he wished he believed in something bigger than himself. Something that could tell him the right choice, the moral path, the way to fix what he'd broken without breaking something else in the process. But there was nothing. Just him, the darkness, and a decision that would destroy someone no matter what he chose. Morning came cold and gray. Elias rose before dawn and found Mara already in the kitchen, kneading bread with mechanical precision. "You're up early," she said without looking at him. "Couldn't sleep." "That makes 2 of us." She punched the dough harder than necessary. "Coffee's hot." He poured a cup and stood there awkwardly, knowing he should say something and having no idea what. "I need to go into town," he said finally. "Today. Business I've been putting off." Mara's hand stilled. "How long are you going to be gone?" "I don't know. Maybe all day." "You coming back?" The question hung between them, weighted with all the things they hadn't said. "Yeah," Elias said. "I'm coming back." Mara nodded slowly, returning to her bread. "Elsie'll be disappointed. She wanted to show you the kittens in the barn." "I'll see them when I get back." "Sure." But her tone said she didn't quite believe him. And honestly, Elias wasn't sure he believed himself. He saddled his horse as the sun broke over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of orange and gold. The ranch looked beautiful in that light, gardens green, fences straight, smoke rising gentle from the chimney. A home. A real home. And he was about to gamble it all on a choice he still hadn't figured out how to make. As he mounted up, Elsie appeared in the doorway in her nightgown, Solomon pressing against her legs. "Where are you going?" "Town. I'll be back tonight." "Promise?" Elias looked at that small face, so trusting, and remembered Mara's warning about making promises he couldn't keep. But the words came out anyway. "Promise." Elsie smiled, satisfied. "Okay, Solomon says bring candy if they got any." "I'll see what I can do." He rode out of the valley as the ranch woke behind him, carrying 2 pieces of paper that would decide 3 people's futures, and absolutely no idea which path would hurt the least. The town was 2 hours away through mountain passes still cold with morning shadow. Elias rode in silence, his mind circling the same impossible problem over and over, finding no answers that didn't taste like ash. By the time he reached the county office, the sun was high and his decision was made. Not a good decision, not a clean one, but the only one he could live with. He tied his horse and walked inside, carrying the weight of 5 years and 2 families on his shoulders, ready to either save a ranch or lose it forever. Either way, nothing would be the same after today. The county clerk was a thin man with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. He looked at Elias over the rim of those glasses like he was examining something mildly distasteful. "You're cutting it close," the clerk said, stamping a form with more force than necessary. "Auction set for 2 o'clock. Another hour, and you'd have been too late." "I'm here now." Elias counted out bills on the counter, money he'd been saving for 5 years, carried in a leather pouch that never left his person. Every dollar represented a week of labor, a month of sleeping rough, years of running. "That cover it?" The clerk counted twice, his lips moving silently. "Taxes, penalties, administrative fees." He made another note in his ledger. "Yes, this settles the debt." He looked up. "You Elias Boone, the name on the deed?" "I am." "Thought you were dead. Been 5 years since anyone saw you." "I've been traveling." "Clearly." The clerk shuffled papers, found the deed, compared signatures. "Everything appears in order. Property's yours again, free and clear. Assuming nobody contests the claim." Elias's jaw tightened. Why would anyone contest it? Word around town is someone's been living out there, woman and a child. The clerk peered at him with open curiosity. "That true?" "Don't know what you heard." "I heard Waylon Griggs has been making noise about squatters' rights and family claims. Says his cousin's widow has more right to that land than some ghost who abandoned it." The clerk leaned forward. "That going to be a problem?" Every instinct screamed at Elias to deny everything, to keep his cards close. But the clerk was waiting, and lying now would only create more tangles later. "There's a woman living there," Elias said carefully. "She's been maintaining the property." "For 5 years?" "Seems that way." The clerk whistled low. "That's going to complicate things. She got any legal standing?" "I don't know." "Well, you better find out, because if Waylon Griggs thinks there's money in this, he'll lawyer up faster than a snake strikes." The clerk stamped one final form and slid the deed across the counter. "Property's yours, Mr. Boone. What you do with it is your business, but friendly advice, get yourself a lawyer before Griggs does." Elias took the deed, the paper feeling heavier than it had that morning. "Appreciate the counsel. One more thing." The clerk removed his spectacles, polishing them on his vest. "That woman out there, she came through town about 5 years back, pregnant, half-starved, asking if anyone knew about the abandoned Boone Ranch. Most folks told her to keep moving. Too remote, too broken down, not safe for a woman alone." He replaced his glasses. "She went anyway, and she survived. Don't know many men who could have done what she did." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I got daughters." The clerk returned to his ledger. "And I'd hope if they were in her position, someone would do right by them. That's all." Elias left the county office with the deed in his pocket and no clear idea of what to do next. The town moved around him, freight wagons rolling past, women with market baskets, men arguing outside the saloon. Normal life, continuing like his entire world wasn't balanced on a knife's edge. He needed to think. Needed to figure out how to... Well, Elias Boone. The voice came from behind, rough and mocking. Elias turned to find Waylon Griggs leaning against a hitching post, arms crossed, smile ugly. "Heard you were in town," Waylon said, "paying your debts, making things legal. That's real responsible of you." "Don't recall asking your opinion." "Don't need to ask. I'm offering it free." Waylon pushed off the post, swaggering closer. "See, I got a problem now. Had my eye on that ranch, figured it'd go to auction, figured I'd pick it up cheap. But then you show up, ghost from the past, and ruin my plans. Not my concern." "Oh, but it is." Waylon's smile widened. "Because that woman and child living on your land? They're family, and I take care of family. By threatening to take the girl away, by offering solutions. Mara's struggling out there. Anyone can see that. Child needs stability, proper schooling, a real home. Not some squatter's shack in the middle of nowhere." Elias stepped closer, dropping his voice. "You threaten that little girl again, we're going to have a different kind of conversation." "That a threat?" "It's a promise." Waylon's eyes narrowed. "You got no stake in this, Boone. You abandoned that land 5 years ago, ran away like a coward and left it to rot. Now you come back because you might lose it to the county, and suddenly you're playing hero?" He spat into the dirt. "You don't give a damn about Mara or her bastard. You just don't want to lose what's yours." The accusation hit home because it was partially true. Elias had come back for the land, for the last piece of his past that still existed in legal terms. But somewhere in the past week, it had stopped being about property and started being about the people living on it. "Believe what you want," Elias said, "but you stay away from that ranch. Stay away from Mara. And you sure as hell stay away from Elsie." "Or what? You'll fight me?" Waylon laughed. "You're one man, Boone. I got friends, I got connections, and I got patience." He tipped his hat in mock courtesy. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts. We'll see how long you stick around when things get difficult." He walked away, leaving Elias standing in the street with rage burning in his chest, and the uncomfortable knowledge that Waylon wasn't entirely wrong. The ride back to the ranch took longer than the ride into town. Elias stopped twice, sitting on ridges and staring at nothing, trying to find the right words for a conversation that had no right words. How did you tell someone that you'd lied from the first moment, that you'd eaten at their table, slept in their barn, worked their land, all while knowing you held the power to destroy everything they'd built? There was no good way, no gentle approach, just the truth, sharp and cutting, and whatever came after. By the time he reached the valley, the sun was low and orange, casting long shadows across the pastures. The ranch looked peaceful in that light, almost like it had before the fire, before the loss, before everything fell apart. For a moment, Elias let himself imagine a different version of events, one where he'd never left, where his family had survived, where this life belonged to him in more than just legal terms. But that version didn't exist, had never existed. And pretending otherwise was just another form of running. He found Mara in the garden, pulling carrots. Elsie was nearby, braiding grass with fierce concentration, while Solomon lounged in the shade. The scene was so ordinary, so domestic, that Elias almost turned around, almost rode back to town and kept going, leaving them to their peace. But he'd made a promise to come back, and he was done breaking promises. Mara saw him first. She straightened, brushing dirt from her skirt, her expression carefully neutral. "You came back." "Said I would." "People say a lot of things." She gathered her basket of carrots. "Elsie, go wash up for supper." "But I'm not done. Now please." The girl recognized the tone and obeyed, dragging Solomon along with her. Once they were out of earshot, Mara turned to Elias with her arms crossed. "You've got that look," she said. "The one men get when they're about to deliver bad news and pretend it's for your own good." Elias dismounted, tying the roan to the fence. "We need to talk." "I figured." She didn't move. "About what? You leaving? You already paid for? Or something worse?" "Worse." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then let's get it over with." They walked to the porch in silence. Inside, Elias could hear Elsie singing something off-key while water splashed. The normalcy of it made what he had to do feel even more brutal. "I paid the county debt today," Elias said. "The ranch is no longer up for auction." Mara's eyes widened slightly. "You what? Why would you?" "Because it's mine." He pulled the deed from his pocket and laid it on the porch rail between them. This ranch, this land, it belonged to my father, and it passed to me when he died. I built this cabin with my own hands 20 years ago. I lived here with my wife. We had a son. The color drained from Mara's face. No. The fire everyone talks about, the one that destroyed this place, that was real. It took my wife and my boy. And I ran, abandoned everything, and spent 5 years drifting because I couldn't face what I'd lost. His voice was steady, mechanical, like he was reading facts from a ledger. When the county notice found me, I came back expecting ruins. Instead, I found you. Mara was shaking her head, backing away. You knew. From the first day you knew this was your land, and you didn't say anything. I didn't know how. You didn't know how? Her voice cracked. I fed you. I trusted you. I let you into my daughter's life. And the whole time you were, what, gathering evidence? Deciding whether to throw us out? No, I was trying to figure out how to fix this. Fix this? Mara laughed, sharp and bitter. There's nothing to fix, Elias. You own the land. I don't. That's the law. That's reality. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice stayed hard. I knew this day would come. Knew I was living on borrowed time. I just thought, I hoped. She couldn't finish. Just stood there crying while her whole world collapsed around her. Elias reached for her, but she jerked away. Don't touch me. Don't you dare. She wiped her face roughly. How long were you planning to let this go on? Another week? Another month? Or were you just going to wait until we got comfortable and then drop this on us? I'm telling you now because you deserve to know the truth. I deserve to know from the start. Mara's hands clenched into fists. You let me believe. I thought you were just a drifter, someone passing through. I thought maybe. She stopped herself. It doesn't matter what I thought. I was an idiot. You weren't. You did everything right. You took abandoned land and made it live again. That took strength I can't even imagine. Strength? Mara's laugh was hollow. Strength doesn't matter when the law's against you. I got no claim here, no rights, just 5 years of work that belongs to someone else now. It doesn't have to. Yes, it does. She met his eyes, her own red and furious. This is your land, legally, morally, every way that counts. And I'm just someone who squatted on it because I had nowhere else to go. The door opened behind them. Elsie stood there, her face scrubbed clean, looking between the adults with growing alarm. Mama, why are you crying? Mara turned away, pressing her hands to her face. Go back inside, baby. But inside, now. Elsie's lip trembled. She looked at Elias like she was waiting for him to fix whatever was wrong, to make Mama stop crying. But he had nothing to offer except more hurt. Solomon appeared in the doorway, pushing past Elsie to press against Mara's legs. The ram made a low sound, almost a groan, and Mara's composure finally broke completely. She sank down onto the porch steps, Solomon beside her, and sobbed into her hands while her daughter watched from the doorway. Elias stood there feeling useless and cruel, the deed still on the railing, proof of all his failures made legal and binding. The locket, he said quietly. The one Elsie wears. I gave it to my wife on our wedding day. She was buried wearing it. Mara looked up, eyes swimming. What? The grave must have been disturbed when you were turning soil. That's how Elsie found it. He paused. My wife's name was Sarah. My son was Thomas. They died in a fire that started in the barn. Lightning strike, middle of winter. By the time I got the animals out, the house was already burning. I tried to get to them, His voice broke. 5 years of holding it in, and the words finally wouldn't come. Mara was staring at him with something between horror and understanding. The cross in the barn, she whispered. I thought there were bones, small bones. I didn't know what to do, so She covered her mouth. I made a marker, said a prayer. I didn't know. You did right, more than I did. They sat in silence while the sun finished setting. Elsie had retreated inside, probably to her small room, probably scared and confused. Solomon stayed pressed against Mara, solid and warm and loyal. I don't know how to fix this, Elias said finally, but I'm trying. There's nothing to fix. You own the land. That's the end of it. It doesn't have to be. Yes, it does. Mara stood, wiping her face. I appreciate you telling me the truth. Finally. But I won't beg you to let us stay. I got pride left, if nothing else. I'm not asking you to beg. I'm asking you to listen. To what? Your terms? Your conditions? She shook her head. I've been at the mercy of men's charity before, Elias. It never ends well. This isn't charity. Sasa, then what is it? She turned on him, anger flaring through the grief. You own everything here. The house I rebuilt, the garden I planted, the fences you helped me mend, all of it's yours. So what exactly are you offering that isn't charity? Elias didn't have an answer. Every option he'd considered, partnership, gradual ownership transfer, some legal arrangement, sounded hollow when he tried to put it into words. How did you give back what should never have been taken in the first place? Keep the land, he said. I'll sign it over. Make it legal. It's yours. Mara stared at him. You can't just... Why not? It's mine to give. Because nothing's that simple. You sign it over, people will ask questions. County will want to know why. Waylon will contest it, claim fraud or coercion or whatever gets him what he wants. She crossed her arms. And even if it somehow goes through, I'd spend the rest of my life knowing I only have this because you felt guilty. Because you pitied the poor unwed mother squatting on your dead family's land. It's not pity. Then what is it? It's... Elias struggled for the right word. It's what should be. You brought this place back from nothing. You earned it in ways I never did. Earning doesn't matter in court. Only papers matter. Only law. Mara's shoulders sagged. I knew this was coming. I just thought I'd have more time to prepare. The door opened again. This time Elsie emerged carrying the gold locket, holding it out like an offering. Is this yours? She asked Elias, her voice small. Elias knelt down to her level. It was my wife's, a long time ago. And she died? Yes. Elsie studied the locket, turning it over in her small hands. Mama says when people die, they go away forever. Is that true? I don't know, honey. I hope not. The little girl looked at him with eyes too old for her face. Are you going to make us go away? The question hit like a physical blow. Mara made a sound halfway between a gasp and a sob, reaching for her daughter. No, Elias said firmly. Nobody's going anywhere. Promise? Elsie, don't... Mara started. Promise? The girl's voice was insistent, demanding the kind of certainty only children believed in. Elias looked at Mara, saw the fear and exhaustion and desperate hope warring in her expression. Then he looked back at Elsie and made a choice that felt both inevitable and terrifying. I promise. This is your home. Nobody's taking it from you. Elsie nodded, satisfied. She held out the locket to Elias. You should have this back. It was your wife's. Elias closed her small fingers around the gold chain. The ground gave it to you. That means it belongs here now. With you and your mama. He stood, addressing Mara. I meant what I said. This land is yours. I'll figure out how to make it legal, how to protect it from Waylon and anyone else. But it's yours. Elias? I'm not asking for anything in return, not gratitude, not partnership, nothing. He picked up the deed from the railing. I ran away from this place once because I couldn't face what I'd lost. I'm not running anymore. And I'm not taking from you what you built. Mara's expression was unreadable. Where will you go? The question caught him off guard. He'd been so focused on giving up the land that he hadn't thought about what came after. I don't know, he admitted, but I'll figure it out. That's your plan? Give away your family's legacy and just wander off again? It stopped being my legacy the day I abandoned it. Now it's yours. And if I don't want it? Mara's voice was sharp. If I'm tired of fighting alone, tired of pretending I can do everything myself, what if I want... She stopped, swallowing hard. What if there's another option? Elias waited, not sure where she was going. Mara took a breath. This ranch needs 2 people. Always has. One person can barely manage the livestock, the garden, the repairs, everything. I've been drowning for 5 years and refusing to admit it. She looked at him directly. You said you're done running. Prove it. Stay. Stay? Work the land. Help me keep this place going. Not as owner and squatter, as... She fumbled for the word. Partners. Equal stake, equal work. Mara, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. Her eyes were bright but steady. I don't trust easy, Elias. You know that by now. And you lied to me, which should make me throw you off this property and never look back. But she glanced at Elsie, who was watching them both with rapt attention. You also kept your promise. You came back, and you're trying to make things right, even if you're going about it like a stubborn mule. I don't deserve... Nobody deserves anything. We just deal with what we got. Mara held out her hand. So here's what I got. A ranch that needs 2 people to survive. A daughter who needs to see her mama doesn't have to carry every burden alone. And a man standing on my porch looking like he finally found something worth staying for. Yes or no, Elias? Before I change my mind. Elias looked at that outstretched hand, rough, scarred, strong. Looked at Elsie clutching her locket. Looked at Solomon, who'd stopped giving him suspicious looks and now just seemed mildly tolerant of his presence. This wasn't redemption. Wasn't forgiveness. It was just an opportunity to stop running and start building something real. He took Mara's hand. Yes, her grip was firm, calloused, warm. Then we got a deal. Equal partners. You pull your weight, I'll pull mine. And if either of us wants out, we handle it like adults. Agreed. And no more lies. Whatever ghosts you're carrying, you deal with them honest. I got enough secrets without adding yours. No more lies, Elias promised. Elsie broke the tension by throwing herself at both of them, wrapping her small arms around their legs. Does this mean Elias is staying for real? Mara looked at him over her daughter's head, one eyebrow raised in question. For real, Elias confirmed. Good. Elsie squeezed tighter. Solomon likes him now. Solomon's a good judge. The ram, hearing his name, made a sound that could have been agreement or gas. Hard to tell. That night at supper, the atmosphere was different. Still careful, still navigating new territory, but without the weight of unspoken lies between them. Elsie chattered about the kittens in the barn, about Solomon's various opinions on ranch matters, about whether Elias could build her a swing from the big tree near the creek. Maybe, Elias said. If your mama agrees. Mama always says maybe when she means yes, Elsie Stage whispered. I do not. You do too. Like when I asked for Solomon and you said maybe, and then we got him anyway. Mara sighed. That's different. Solomon chose us. We didn't have a say. Still counts. After Elsie went to bed, Elias and Mara sat on the porch with coffee, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Solomon had taken his usual position blocking the doorway, already snoring. We should talk about Waylon, Mara said quietly. He won't stop just because you paid the taxes. I know, I saw him in town. He made threats. Mara's hands tightened around her cup. What kind? The kind that say he's not done fighting for this land. Or for Elsie. He's got no claim to her. He's barely even family, just some distant cousin who showed up after Elsie was born, acting like blood gives him rights. Law doesn't always care about what's right, just what's legal. Elias paused. We need to make your position here solid. Not just squatters' rights or my goodwill, something the county can't dispute. How? Elias had been thinking about this on the ride back. Marriage. Mara choked on her coffee. What? Legally, I mean, not... He felt heat rise in his face. Not a real marriage, just papers. It would give you legal standing as my wife, which means automatic claim to the property, and it would make Elsie legally mine, which means Waylon couldn't touch her. Mara was staring at him like he'd suggested they fly to the moon. That's your solution? A fake marriage? It's practical. It's insane. You got a better idea? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No, but that doesn't mean yours is good. It protects you both. That's all that matters. And what do you get out of it? A clear conscience and a home, if you'll have me. Mara set down her coffee cup carefully. This isn't some storybook, Elias. You can't just marry the widow and make everything right. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're trying to fix your past by rewriting it with new people. The accusation stung because it was partially true, but only partially. Maybe at first, Elias admitted. When I came back, I was looking for ghosts, looking for a way to bury what I'd lost. But that's not what this is now. Then what is it? It's 2 people trying to protect something worth keeping. He met her eyes. You need legal standing. I can give you that. Doesn't have to mean anything beyond the paper. Mara was quiet for a long time. And if I say yes, what happens when you get restless? When the ghosts come back and you need to run again? I'm done running. You say that now. I mean it. People mean a lot of things. But her voice had lost its edge. She was considering it, weighing the options, doing the same cold calculations Elias had done on the ride back. Think about it, Elias said. No pressure. But Waylon's not going to wait around. And the county's going to want to see clear ownership before winter. I know. Mara stood, gathering the coffee cups. I'll think about it. But Elias? Yeah? If we do this, if we make it legal, it can't be built on lies. Not anymore. We tell each other the truth even when it's hard. Agreed. She went inside, leaving Elias alone with the stars and the weight of choices that would reshape everything. From inside, he heard Mara moving around, banking the fire, checking on Elsie, settling the house for the night. Normal sounds, domestic sounds, the kind he'd thought he'd never hear again. He pulled out the deed one more time, looking at his father's signature, his own signature, the legal language that made this land his. Tomorrow he'd need to talk to a lawyer, figure out how to transfer ownership or establish partnership or whatever legal framework would protect Mara and Elsie from men like Waylon. But tonight, sitting on a porch he'd built with his own hands, listening to a family that wasn't his but might become his, Elias felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Peace. Not the peace of closure or resolution, just the peace of finally stopping, of standing still long enough to let the world catch up, of choosing to build instead of run. Inside, a lamp went out, then another. The house settled into darkness, save for the stars overhead and the small sounds of a ranch preparing for sleep. Elias stayed on the porch until the cold drove him to the barn, where he lay in his usual stall and stared at the rafters and tried to imagine a future that didn't involve drifting. For the first time in years, he could. Morning came with frost thick on the ground and Mara's voice cutting through the barn door. Elias, we got company. He was up and out before his boots were fully laced, expecting Waylon, but the horse tied at the fence belonged to Tom Brennan, and the older rancher was standing in the yard looking uncomfortable while Mara kept her arms crossed tight against the cold. Tom says there's talk in town, Mara said without preamble. You should hear it. Tom shifted his weight, hat in his hands. Didn't want to spread gossip, but figured you ought to know. Waylon's been drinking at the saloon, running his mouth about how he's going to get this land one way or another. Let him talk, Elias said. It's more than talk. He's been meeting with a lawyer from Helena. Man named Pritchard, real sharp, handles property disputes. Tom looked between them. Word is they're building a case. Something about adverse possession working both ways, claiming Mara can't have rights because she knew the land wasn't abandoned, and Elias can't claim it because he left it too long. That's not how the law works, Mara said. Don't matter if it's creative legal thinking. What matters is Pritchard's good at making mud stick. Tom put his hat back on. I came out here to warn you both. Whatever you're planning, do it fast, because Waylon's moving, and he ain't going to wait for you to get your house in order. After Tom left, Mara stood in the yard staring at nothing while her breath puffed white in the morning air. We need to decide, she said finally, about the marriage thing, about all of it. Elias had spent the night thinking the same thing. What do you want to do? I want to keep my daughter safe. I want to keep this ranch. She turned to face him. But I won't trap you in something you don't want just because it's convenient. It's not about convenience anymore. Then what's it about? Elias looked at the ranch, the house standing solid, the garden beds mulched for winter, the fences straight and strong. It's about not letting someone like Waylon win, about protecting what matters. And what matters to you, Elias? Really? The question deserved honesty. A week ago, I would have said closure, coming back to bury the past and move on. He paused. Now? Now it's this. You, Elsie, the ranch. Making something work instead of letting it die. Mara studied him for a long moment. All right. We do it. But we do it right. Legal, public, everything above board so Waylon can't contest it later. Agreed. And Elias? Her voice softened slightly. If this gets to be too much, if the ghosts come back and you need out, you tell me. Don't just disappear one day. I won't. Promise? I promise. She nodded once, decisive. Then we ride to town tomorrow. Talk to whoever we need to talk to. Make it official. Inside the house, Elsie was awake and demanding breakfast. Solomon bleated from his position near the stove, angling for scraps. The morning routine unfolded like it had every day since Elias arrived, except now everything felt different, weighted with decisions that would reshape all their lives. "Mama, can Elias teach me to ride today?" Elsie asked around a mouthful of oatmeal. "Maybe later. We got work to do." "You always say that." "Because it's always true." But Mara smiled slightly. "After chores, maybe, if Elias is willing." "I'm willing," Elias said. "Your mama's old mare is gentle enough." Elsie's face lit up. "Really?" "Really. But you do what your mama says first." The girl attacked her breakfast with renewed energy, already planning out loud all the places she'd ride once she learned. Solomon listened with his usual patient expression, occasionally butting his head against Elsie's leg when she stopped petting him. Mara caught Elias's eye across the table, and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or just the shared weight of adults trying to build something stable for a child who'd already seen too much uncertainty. They spent the day preparing for winter. Elias chopped and stacked wood until his shoulders screamed. Mara finished harvesting the last of the garden, storing root vegetables in the cellar, and hanging herbs to dry in the rafters. Elsie helped where she could, and got underfoot where she couldn't, with Solomon trailing behind her like a patient shadow. Around midday, Elias kept his promise and saddled Mara's mare, a 15-year-old sorrel named Daisy, who'd probably forgotten what it was like to move faster than a walk. Elsie stood on the fence rail while he adjusted the stirrups, practically vibrating with excitement. "She's so big up close," Elsie breathed. "She's the smallest horse we got, and the gentlest." Elias lifted the girl into the saddle, feet in the stirrups, hands on the horn. "Don't kick her or she'll think you want to go fast." "What if I do want to go fast?" "You don't. Not today." He led Daisy around the yard in slow circles while Elsie clung to the saddle horn with white knuckles and a grin that split her face. Solomon followed at a distance, making disapproving noises, clearly unconvinced this was a good idea. Mara emerged from the cellar to watch, leaning against the door frame with dirt on her skirt and something soft in her expression. "Look, Mama, I'm riding." "I see that, baby. You're doing real good." After 3 circuits, Elsie's confidence grew and her grip loosened. She sat straighter, started moving with the horse's rhythm instead of against it. Natural rider, Elias thought. Given time, she'd be racing Solomon across the pastures. When he finally lifted her down, Elsie threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you. That was the best thing ever." The hug caught him off guard. For a moment he just stood there, this small person clinging to him with complete trust, and something in his chest cracked open. He carefully patted her back, not quite sure what to do with the sudden swell of feeling. "You're welcome, honey." Elsie released him and ran to Mara, babbling about how high up she'd been and how Daisy had listened to her and how Solomon had been worried, but she'd been brave. Mara scooped her up despite the girl being too big to be carried, spinning her once before setting her down. "All right, brave rider. Go check the chicken eggs. I'll start supper." Elsie obeyed, skipping toward the coop with Solomon plodding after her. Alone in the yard, Mara and Elias stood in awkward silence. "She's never had that before," Mara said quietly. "Someone teaching her things, being patient with her. She's a good kid. She is, but that's not—" Mara stopped herself. "Never mind. Thank you for being kind to her. Wasn't kindness, just keeping a promise." "Still—" Mara turned toward the house, then paused. "When we do this, the marriage, I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for Elsie to have a father replacement. Her father's gone, and that's that. I just need her to be safe and have a home. That's all." "I understand." "Do you? Because she gets attached easy, and I won't have her heart broken when you decide you've had enough of playing house." The accusation stung. "I'm not playing anything." "Then what are you doing?" Elias struggled to find words that didn't sound hollow. "I'm trying to be someone worth trusting again. Someone who keeps promises instead of breaking them." Mara's expression softened fractionally. "All right. But if this goes wrong, we're the ones who pay for it. Not you, us. Remember that." She went inside, leaving Elias in the yard with Daisy and the uncomfortable knowledge that Mara was right to be cautious. He'd broken every important promise he'd ever made. Why should she believe this time would be different? That night at supper, Elsie announced that Solomon had decided Elias was officially part of the family now. How'd Solomon decide that? Mara asked, amused despite herself. He just knows things. He's very smart. Elsie said this with absolute conviction. He says Elias can stay as long as he wants. Well, if Solomon says so, Mara said dryly. Solomon's right, Elsie continued. Elias is good at fixing things, and he doesn't yell, and he lets me help even when I'm probably just making things harder. You don't make things harder, Elias said. Yes, I do, but you're nice about it. Elsie took a drink of milk, leaving a white mustache. Are you going to stay forever? The question hung in the air. Mara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Even Solomon seemed to be waiting for the answer. I'm planning on it, Elias said carefully. If that's all right with you and your mama. It's all right with me. Mama? Mara set down her fork. We'll see, baby. Nothing's forever. But finish your supper. Elsie subsided, but her eyes stayed on Elias, hopeful and trusting in the way that made him want to be better than he was. The next morning, they rode to town. All three of them, with Elsie perched in front of Mara on the saddle and Solomon left behind despite his loud protests. The girl chattered the whole way, pointing out landmarks and telling stories, while Mara and Elias rode in tense silence. The town looked the same as it had 2 days ago, but it felt different riding in together. People noticed. Heads turned. An older woman whispered to her companion behind her hand. By the time they reached the county office, Elias could feel eyes following them. The clerk looked up when they entered, his spectacles catching the light. Mr. Boone, back again so soon? Need to file some papers. What kind of papers? Marriage license, and adoption papers if that's possible. The clerk's eyebrows rose. He looked at Mara, then at Elsie, clinging to her mother's hand, then back at Elias. That's so. It is. Well, the clerk shuffled through a drawer, pulling out forms. You'll need to fill these out. Both of you sign. There's a waiting period, 3 days. Then you can have the ceremony performed by the justice of the peace or any ordained— 3 days? Mara interrupted. That's the fastest? Unless there's extenuating circumstances. There are, Elias said. We've got someone trying to contest property ownership. Need this settled before it becomes a legal mess. The clerk studied them both, then sighed. I can file it as urgent. Judge Morrison might waive the waiting period if you can prove necessity. He pushed the forms across the counter. But understand, once this is filed, it's public record. Anyone can see it. That's the point, Mara said quietly. They filled out the forms in silence. Names, dates, signatures. Elsie watched with wide eyes, not quite understanding what was happening, but sensing its importance. When they finished, the clerk stamped everything with official-looking seals. I'll get this to Judge Morrison today. Come back tomorrow morning. If he approves, you can be married by afternoon. The clerk paused. Assuming you're both sure about this. We're sure, Mara said before Elias could answer. Outside, the morning sun was bright and cold. Elsie had wandered off to look in a store window, giving the adults a moment of privacy. No going back now, Mara said. You having second thoughts? About a dozen. She adjusted her shawl. But that doesn't change what needs doing. They were heading back to the horses when a familiar voice called out, Well, well, the whole family together. How touching. Waylon stood outside the saloon, arms crossed, smile sharp. 2 men flanked him, ranch hands by the look of them, hired muscle meant to intimidate. Elias stepped in front of Mara. We got no business with you, Waylon. Oh, but we got business with you. Waylon sauntered closer, his boots loud on the wooden boardwalk. Heard you two were in the county office, filing papers, making things legal. He made a show of looking around. Where's the blushing bride's wedding dress? Or is this one of them practical arrangements? Marriage of convenience? None of your concern, Mara said coldly. Everything about you is my concern, cousin. Waylon's smile widened. See, I've been talking to lawyers. Real smart ones. And they tell me a suspicious marriage right when property disputes arise? That looks like fraud. Conspiracy to deprive rightful claimants of their due. You got no claim, Elias said. Maybe not, but I got enough to make trouble. Enough to drag this through court for months, maybe years. Waylon leaned against a post. And what happens to that ranch while lawyers argue? Who feeds the livestock through winter? Who keeps the pipes from freezing? We do, Mara said. Same as we've been doing. You think so? Wait till the county starts asking questions. Wait till they send inspectors out to verify ownership, check if the marriage is real or just paper. He laughed. You two ain't even sharing a bed. How you going to convince anyone this is legitimate? Heat rose in Elias's face. What we do or don't do is evidence, Waylon interrupted. Evidence of fraud. And when my lawyers present that evidence, the judge will see right through this charade. Marriage annulled, land transferred to rightful claimants, and that little bastard, he nodded toward Elsie, still oblivious at the store window, goes where she belongs, with family who can provide proper care. Something in Elias snapped. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and grabbed Waylon by the collar, slamming him back against the post hard enough to rattle the wood. You threaten that child one more time, Elias said quietly, and I will end you. Legal, illegal, I don't care. You understand me? Waylon's smile never wavered even as his hired men stepped forward. That's assault. In front of witnesses. You're making this real easy for my lawyers. Mara's hand closed on Elias's arm. Let him go. He's not worth it. For a moment, Elias didn't move. His fist was cocked back, ready. 5 years of running and rage coiled in his muscles, begging for release. But Mara's grip tightened, and he heard Elsie's voice calling for them from down the street. He released Waylon and stepped back. This ain't over, Waylon said, straightening his collar. Not even close. You want to play legal games? Fine. Let's see who's got more money for lawyers when this is done. He walked away, his men following, leaving Elias and Mara standing in the street. You can't let him bait you, Mara said quietly. That's what he wants. Give him ammunition. He threatened Elsie. I know. But fighting him in the street won't protect her. Filing those papers will. Making this marriage look real will. She met his eyes. Can you do that? Can you play the part even though we're not? I can do whatever it takes, Elias said. Elsie ran up, clutching a piece of ribbon candy the shopkeeper had given her. Mama, look, can I have it? After lunch, baby, Mara smoothed her daughter's hair, her hand shaking slightly. Let's get out of town. I don't like it here. The ride back was quieter. Elsie dozed against Mara's chest, worn out from excitement. The adults rode in silence, both processing what had just happened and what it meant. He's serious, Mara said as the ranch came into view. About the lawyers, the inspections, all of it. I know, which means we need to be serious too, about making this look real. She paused. I'm not saying we have to. I mean, the marriage is just paper, but we need to look like a real family, act like one. How do we do that? I don't know. Normal married couples share a house, eat together, work together. They don't sleep in separate buildings. Mara's voice was carefully neutral. You've been staying in the barn. That's going to look suspicious to anyone checking. Elias understood what she was suggesting. I can sleep in the main room, on the floor, near the fire. There's a bed, Mara said, in my room, big enough for 2 if people keep to their own sides. The suggestion hung between them, awkward and loaded with implications neither wanted to examine. Mara, I don't want you to feel like... I don't. I'm being practical. Inspectors come by, they need to see 1 bedroom in use, husband and wife sharing space. She wouldn't look at him. It doesn't have to mean anything, just has to look right. If you're sure. I'm sure about what needs doing. Everything else is just details. That night, after Elsie was asleep and Solomon had settled in his usual spot blocking the doorway, Elias brought his bedroll into the main cabin for the first time. Mara had moved some of her things to make room, cleared space in a corner for his sparse belongings. The bedroom was small, barely room for the bed, a washstand, and a trunk. Mara had already claimed the side nearest the wall. She lay there now, facing away, her breathing too controlled to be natural sleep. Elias settled on the far edge, leaving as much space between them as possible. The mattress was straw-stuffed, lumpy, nothing like the soft beds he'd known in his previous life. But it was warmer than the barn, and the sounds of the house settling around them were oddly comforting. Thank you, Mara said quietly into the darkness, for standing up to Waylon, even if it wasn't smart. He had it coming, maybe, But we can't afford to give him ammunition. She shifted slightly. Tomorrow we go back to town. See if the judge approved the waiver. If he did, we get married tomorrow afternoon. And then? Then we wait. See what Waylon does next. Hope we've done enough to protect Elsie and the ranch. She paused. You scared? Elias thought about it. Yeah. You? Terrified. They lay in silence after that, two people bound by necessity and maybe something more, pretending to sleep while their minds raced through all the ways this could go wrong. In the morning, they returned to town. Judge Morrison had approved the waiver. The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock. They spent the intervening hours in a strange limbo, too nervous to eat, too restless to sit still. Mara braided and rebraided Elsie's hair. Elias checked and rechecked the horses. The girl seemed to sense something important was happening, growing quieter as the hours passed. At 2 o'clock, they stood in Judge Morrison's office, a dusty room that smelled like old books and pipe tobacco. The judge was 70 if he was a day, with a voice like gravel and eyes that saw too much. This is irregular, he said, looking over the papers. Rushed marriage right when property's in dispute. Makes a man wonder about motivations. Our motivations are our business, Mara said. Not when fraud's alleged. They're not. Morrison peered at her over his glasses. You understand what you're signing here, miss? Marriage ain't something to be undone easy, and if this is proved false, there's legal consequences. For both of you. We understand, Elias said. Do you? Morrison turned to him. You abandoned this land 5 years ago. Now you're back, marrying a woman you barely know, adopting her child. That's a lot of life changes in a short time. Sometimes life changes fast, Morrison grunted. And sometimes people make desperate choices they regret later. He set down the papers. I'm going to ask you both one time, plain and honest. Is this marriage genuine, or is it a legal maneuver to protect property? Mara and Elias looked at each other. The truth was complicated. Yes, it was practical. Yes, it was about protection. But somewhere in the past days it had become something else too, something neither could quite name. It's genuine, Mara said firmly, in the ways that matter. Morrison studied them both for a long moment. Then he sighed. All right, but understand, I'll be watching. Any sign this is fraudulent, I'll annul it myself and let Waylon's lawyers have at you. Clear? Clear, they said together. Then let's get this done. The ceremony was brief. Morrison read from a book, asked them to repeat words that sounded strange in Elias's mouth. Mara's hands were shaking when he took them. Her eyes stayed fixed on his, searching for something, reassurance maybe, or just confirmation they were doing the right thing. Do you, Elias Boone, take this woman? I do. Do you, Mara Whitlock, take this man? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Morrison closed his book. You may kiss if you're so inclined, though I suspect you'll skip that part. But Mara surprised them both by leaning forward and pressing her lips briefly to Elias's. It was chaste, awkward, lasting maybe 2 seconds. But it was real. For appearances, she whispered as she pulled back. Right, Elias managed. Appearances. Morrison handed them the certificate. It's legal now. You're married. And Miss Elsie here. He looked down at the girl who'd been watching everything with wide eyes. Is now legally your daughter, Mr. Boone. That comes with responsibilities. You understand? I do, Elias said, and meant it. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright. People stared as they walked to the horses. The rushed wedding was already gossip, probably spreading through town like wildfire. But Mara held her head high, and Elias matched her stride, and Elsie walked between them holding both their hands. They looked like a family. Maybe if they pretended long enough, they'd become one. Waylon was waiting at the edge of town. He sat on his horse, blocking the road, that same ugly smile on his face. But this time he was alone. No hired muscle, no backup. Just him and his spite. Congratulations, he called out. Heard you two made it official. Real romantic, I'm sure. Elias guided his horse around, giving Waylon wide berth. But the man followed, keeping pace. You think this changes anything? Waylon said. You think a piece of paper makes you a family? It makes us legal, Mara said, which is more than you got. For now. But marriages can be annulled, adoptions contested, And I got time and money on my side. He tipped his hat mockingly. Enjoy your honeymoon. Hope it's worth what's coming. He rode off, leaving them in the road with the taste of his threat still hanging in the air. Elsie looked up at Elias, her small face worried. Is Uncle Waylon going to hurt us? Elias knelt down to her level, blocking Waylon's retreating figure from view. No, honey, he's not, because I won't let him. Promise? Promise. Elsie threw her arms around his neck, trusting completely. And Elias held her, this child who was legally his daughter now, and made a silent vow that whatever it took, whatever he had to do, Waylon Griggs would never touch her. The ride home was quiet. Mara looked exhausted, the weight of the day showing in her shoulders. Elsie dozed in front of her, worn out from stress she was too young to fully understand. When they reached the ranch, Solomon was waiting in the yard, bleeding his displeasure at being left behind. Elsie perked up immediately, sliding down from the horse to hug the ram. We got married, Solomon. Elias is my papa now. The ram looked at Elias, then at Mara, then made a sound that could have been approval or indigestion, still hard to tell. Come on, baby, Mara said. Let's get you fed and ready for bed. It's been a long day. Inside, the cabin felt different somehow, like the legal papers had changed the air itself. Mara moved through her evening routine, starting supper, banking the fire, checking that everything was secured for night. Elias helped where he could, still learning the rhythms of this household that was now his. After Elsie went to bed, they sat at the table with coffee. Neither of them drank. We did it, Mara said finally. For better or worse, we're married now. Legally, anyway. Is there another kind? Elias didn't know how to answer that. I'll do right by you, by Elsie, however long this lasts. It has to last, Elias. We can't undo this easily, not without proving Waylon right, that it was fraud. She looked at him directly. Which means we're stuck with each other. You ready for that? Ready as I'll ever be. That's not comforting. I know. He reached across the table, offering his hand. But I meant what I said in there. I'm done running. This is where I stay. Mara looked at his hand for a long moment before taking it. Her grip was strong, certain, the handshake of equals entering a partnership built on necessity, and maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of something more. Then we make it work, she said. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, Elias agreed. That night they lay in the same bed again, the space between them still careful, still measured. But something had shifted. The awkwardness remained, but underneath it was a foundation. Fragile, new, built on honesty finally spoken and promises finally made. Outside, the ranch settled into darkness. Solomon bleated once from his position guarding Elsie's door. An owl called from the pines. And two people who'd been strangers a week ago lay side by side, legally bound, trying to build something real from the ruins of everything they'd lost. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was a start. The first snow came 3 weeks after the wedding. Elias woke to white silence, and Mara already gone from her side of the bed. Through the window, the world had transformed overnight. Every fence post crowned with snow, every branch weighted down, the valley floor smooth and unmarked except for animal tracks leading to the barn. He found Mara in the kitchen, kneading bread with the fierce concentration she brought to every task. She didn't look up when he entered. Roads will be closed by afternoon, she said, which means if Waylon's planning anything, he'll have to wait till spring. Or he'll come before the next storm hits. Always the optimist. But there was no heat in it, just tired acceptance. They'd settled into an uneasy routine over the past weeks, working side by side during the day, sharing meals, sleeping in the same bed with careful space between them. To anyone watching, they looked like a married couple. Sometimes Elias almost believed it himself. But the tension never fully left. They were two people play-acting at normalcy, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped that afternoon. Tom Brennan arrived on horseback, his face grim. Got word from town. County inspector's coming. Week from now, maybe sooner if the weather holds. They're checking the legitimacy of your marriage. Mara's hand stilled on the bread dough. On whose request? Waylon filed a formal complaint. Claims fraud, coercion, conspiracy to defraud rightful claimants. Tom dismounted, brushing snow from his coat. I'm sorry, Mara. I tried to vouch for you both, but once it's filed official, the county has to investigate. What do they check? Elias asked. Everything. How long you've known each other, sleeping arrangements, financial entanglement, Whether the child calls you father. Tom looked uncomfortable. They're looking for cracks. Anything that suggests this isn't a real marriage. After Tom left, Mara stood at the window staring out at the snow. Elsie was in the yard with Solomon, building something that might have been a snow fort or possibly a snow ram. Hard to tell. The girls' laughter carried clear in the cold air. We're not going to pass, Mara said quietly. They'll take one look at us and know we're pretending. We've been doing fine. Fine isn't enough. We barely talk except about chores. We don't touch. We sleep on opposite edges of the bed like there's a wall between us. She turned to face him. They're going to see through us in 5 minutes. Then we try harder. How? You can't fake years of intimacy in a week. Can't fake the kind of comfort people have when they actually... She stopped herself. When they actually what? Mara's expression was raw. When they actually chose each other. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She wrapped her arms around herself. We don't have that. We got a piece of paper and good intentions, and that's not going to be enough when people start asking questions. Elias crossed to her, stopping just short of touching. What do you want me to do, Mara? Tell me, and I'll do it. I want you to mean it, she said, so quietly he almost missed it. When you stand next to me, when you say we're a family, I want it to be real, not just performance. It is real. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're still sleeping with one foot out the door, still keeping yourself separate, like you're waiting for permission to leave. The accusation stung because part of it was true. Elias had been holding back, keeping walls up, protecting himself from getting too attached to something that might collapse. He'd lost one family already. The thought of investing in another one, only to lose it again or have it torn away, but that was the coward's way out. And he was done being a coward. You're right, he said. I've been playing it safe, keeping distance because it's easier than risking... He struggled for words. Than risking this mattering too much. And does it? Mara asked. Matter to you? Elias looked past her to where Elsie was showing Solomon her snow creation, the ram patiently enduring the girl's enthusiastic explanations. Looked at the cabin he'd built with his own hands, now filled with life he'd never expected to find again. Looked at Mara herself, strong, stubborn, scared, but standing her ground anyway. Yeah, he said, it matters. Something shifted in Mara's expression, not quite softening, but opening slightly. Then show me. Not for the inspector, not for Waylon, for me. Show me this is more than just convenience. Before he could talk himself out of it, Elias reached for her hand. She startled slightly but didn't pull away. Her fingers were rough from work, warm despite the cold. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Haven't let myself care about people in 5 years, but I'm trying. And if you need me to try harder, I will. Mara looked down at their joined hands. I'm scared, she whispered, that we're building something on a foundation that'll crack the moment real pressure hits. Then we build it stronger. How? By stopping the pretending. By being honest about what this is. Two broken people trying to make something whole. He squeezed her hand gently. We're never going to be a storybook family, Mara. We're too damaged for that. But maybe we can be something real anyway. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, closing the careful distance they'd maintained, and rested her forehead against his chest. Not quite an embrace, but not separate either. Just two people holding each other up. I'm tired of doing everything alone, she said into his shirt. Tired of being strong every minute. Tired of pretending I don't need help. Elias wrapped his arms around her carefully, like she was something fragile that might break. Then let me help. For real this time. They stood like that while the snow fell outside, and Elsie's laughter echoed across the yard. When they finally pulled apart, something had changed. The space between them felt less like a barrier and more like something they were learning to navigate together. That night at supper, Elsie noticed. You're sitting closer, she observed, spooning stew into her mouth. You weren't before. Mara and Elias glanced at each other. They were indeed sitting closer, not touching, but near enough that their elbows occasionally brushed. Is that okay? Mara asked. Elsie considered this seriously. Solomon says it's about time. He was getting worried. Solomon worries about a lot of things, Elias said. That's because he's responsible. Elsie said this with the gravity of someone quoting wisdom. He says families should sit close so they can protect each other. From his position by the door, Solomon made a sound that might have been agreement. After Elsie went to bed, Elias and Mara lingered at the table longer than usual. The conversation came easier now, not forced, not stilted, just two people talking about the day's work, about plans for winter, about small things that added up to a life being built. "The inspector," Mara said eventually. "When they come, they're going to ask Elsie questions. About you. About us. What will she say? The truth. That you showed up a month ago, that we got married fast, that you sleep in the same room as me, but we're not." She stopped. "She's 5. She'll answer honest. Will honest be enough? I don't know." Mara traced a knot in the wood table. "Wayland's going to paint this as fraud. We need to counter that with something real." "Like what?" She met his eyes. "Like looking like we actually chose this. Chose each other. Not just for legal protection, but because we—" She struggled with the words. "Because we want to build a life together. Don't we? Do we?" Mara's voice was soft. "Or are we just two people trapped by circumstances, making the best of a bad situation?" Elias thought about it, really thought about it. A month ago, he would have said it was purely practical. 2 weeks ago, maybe he would have called it mutually beneficial. But now? Now he couldn't imagine walking away. Couldn't picture leaving this valley, this ranch, this strange little family that had formed despite all logic. "I think," he said carefully, "it started as survival. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. At least for me." Mara was quiet for so long, he thought he'd said the wrong thing. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. "For me too," she whispered. They sat like that, hands joined, while the fire burned low and the house settled around them. When they finally went to bed, the space between them was smaller. Not gone. There were still walls to break down, still fear to overcome, but smaller. Progress. The inspector arrived on a clear, cold morning 5 days later. Her name was Margaret Holt, and she was nothing like Elias expected. 50s, gray-haired, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades spotting lies. She rode up alone, dismounted with practiced ease, and knocked on the door like she owned the place. "Mr. and Mrs. Boone, I'm here on behalf of the county to verify the legitimacy of your marriage claim." Mara invited her in, offered coffee, moved through the motions of hospitality while tension coiled in her shoulders. Elsie watched from her position near Solomon, curiosity warring with instinctive caution around strangers. Margaret Holt accepted the coffee and settled into a chair like she planned to stay a while. She pulled out a notebook, licked the tip of her pencil, and began. "How long have you known each other?" "About a month," Elias said honestly. Holt's eyebrows rose. "And you married after a month of acquaintance?" "Yes." "Why the rush?" Mara and Elias exchanged glances. They'd prepared for this, rehearsed answers that walked the line between truth and strategy, but sitting here under Holt's scrutiny, the rehearsed words felt hollow. "Because someone was trying to take my daughter," Mara said quietly, "and the law would have let him if I couldn't prove stability, legal standing." "So this marriage is about legal protection?" "It started that way," Elias said. "But that's not what it is now." "What is it now?" The question hung in the air. Holt waited, pencil poised, face neutral. "It's real," Mara said. "Maybe it didn't start traditional. Maybe we didn't have a long courtship or romance. But we're building something real here. Something worth protecting." Holt made a note. "The child, Elsie. She's legally yours now, Mr. Boone?" "Yes, ma'am." "And she calls you father?" Before Elias could answer, Elsie piped up from across the room. "I call him Papa sometimes, when I remember." Holt turned to the girl with a softer expression. "Come here, sweetheart. I just want to ask you some questions." Elsie looked to Mara, who nodded. The girl approached cautiously, Solomon padding along beside her. "That's a fine ram you have there," Holt said. "His name is Solomon. He's very smart and he protects us." Elsie said this with complete confidence. "I bet he does. Now, can you tell me about your papa? The man sitting there?" Elsie looked at Elias, considering. "He came here a month ago. He was sad about something, but he wouldn't talk about it. He helped Mama fix the fences and he taught me to ride Daisy, and he tells stories about rams and mountains." "Do you like him?" "Yes, he's nice, And he doesn't yell, and he lets me help even when I'm probably being annoying. Elsie paused. Is he in trouble? No, sweetheart. I'm just checking that everyone's happy here. We are. Except when Uncle Waylon comes. He's mean, and he makes Mama cry. Holt made another note. Thank you, Elsie. You can go back to Solomon now. After the girl retreated, Holt turned her attention back to the adults. I need to verify sleeping arrangements. Show me the bedroom, please. Mara led her to the small room off the main cabin. Holt examined everything with clinical detachment. The single bed, the shared washstand, the mixed clothing on pegs, the 2 sets of boots by the door. You share this bed? Yes, Mara said. Every night? Every night. Holt pulled back the blankets, checking for signs of dual occupancy. She found them. 2 dented pillows, blankets rumpled on both sides, the subtle signs of 2 people sleeping in one space. And you're intimate? As husband and wife? Mara's face flushed. That's private. It's also relevant. A marriage that's never consummated can be annulled on those grounds alone. Elias stepped forward. We're married in all the ways that matter. What happens in our bedroom is between us. Holt studied them both, her expression unreadable. Then she closed her notebook. I've seen enough. And? Mara's voice was tight. And I'll submit my report to the county. They'll make the final determination. Holt moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I've investigated dozens of fraudulent marriages. People marrying for immigration, for inheritance, for all kinds of legal maneuvering. They all have a feel, rehearsed, performative, hollow. She looked between them. You two don't have that feel. You're awkward with each other, yes. New at this, certainly. But there's something real building here. I can see it. Hope flickered in Mara's eyes. So you'll tell them it's legitimate? I'll tell them what I observed. Whether that's enough to counter Waylon Griggs's allegations? She shrugged. That's above my authority. But you've got a better chance than most. After Holt left, Mara sagged against the doorframe. We passed. I think we passed. Maybe. Elias didn't want to celebrate prematurely. But Waylon's not done. Even if the county rules in our favor, he'll find another angle. Then we deal with it. Mara straightened, finding her steel again. Together. The word hung between them, weighted with new meaning. That night, lying in bed with slightly less space between them, Mara spoke into the darkness. What Holt asked? About being intimate. She paused. I told her it was private because I didn't want to lie. But the truth is, I know, Elias said quietly. We're not there yet. Maybe we never will be. That's okay. Is it? Because if Waylon pushes hard enough, if they dig deep enough, then we deal with it honestly. I'm not going to pressure you into something you don't want just to satisfy legal scrutiny. Mara rolled onto her side to face him, barely visible in the dark. What if I told you I'm starting to want it? Not for legal reasons, just because... She stopped. Elias's breath caught. Because what? Because you're the first man in 5 years who's looked at me like I'm more than just a burden to manage. Who's treated Elsie with genuine kindness? Who stayed when it got hard instead of running? Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't think I'd ever trust someone enough to want that again, but I'm getting there. With you. Elias reached across the space between them, finding her hand in the dark. We've got time. No rush. We build this at whatever pace feels right. And if Waylon forces our hand, then we'll figure it out together, but I won't take something you're not ready to give just to win a legal fight. Some lines I won't cross. Mara squeezed his hand. Thank you. They fell asleep like that, hands joined across the diminishing space, 2 people learning to trust after years of protecting themselves. Waylon's next move came a week later, and it was vicious. He arrived with the county sheriff and a man in a suit, the lawyer from Helena, Elias guessed. They rode up in formation, official and intimidating. Mr. Boone, the sheriff said, dismounting, I've got a court order here requiring you to appear before Judge Morrison. There's been allegations of improper adoption procedures and marriage fraud. Mara stepped onto the porch, Elsie behind her. He's done nothing wrong. That's for the judge to decide, ma'am. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. I'm just serving papers. Waylon stayed on his horse, smiling. Should have taken my offer when you had the chance, cousin. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. The only trouble here is you, Mara said coldly. Careful, that sounds like a threat. The lawyer stepped forward, all polish and shark smile. My client has legitimate concerns about the welfare of a minor child and the fraudulent transfer of valuable property. We intend to pursue this to the fullest extent of the law. Elsie pressed against Mara's legs, frightened by the tension. Solomon positioned himself in front of the girl, head lowered, clearly prepared to charge if these strangers got any closer. Elias took the papers from the sheriff. The hearing was set for 2 weeks out. Plenty of time for Waylon to spread poison through town, to build his case, to make Elias and Mara look like con artists preying on legal loopholes. "We'll be there," Elias said. After they left, Mara sank onto the porch steps, her face in her hands. "He's not going to stop, not ever." "Then we fight harder." "With what? We got no money for fancy lawyers, no connections, just us and the truth doesn't always win." Her voice cracked. "I can't lose her, Elias. I can't lose Elsie. She's everything." Elias sat beside her, pulling her against him. She resisted for half a second, then collapsed into his shoulder, shaking. "You're not going to lose her. I promise you that." "You can't promise that. Courts do what they want, and if they decide a bastard child is better off with traditional family, with Waylon's money and stability, then we show them what real family looks like. Not money, not tradition, love, protection, sacrifice." He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "We fight for her, together, and we don't stop until we win." Mara searched his face, looking for certainty he wasn't sure he could provide, but she must have found something because she nodded. "Together," she whispered. The 2 weeks before the hearing were the hardest of Elias's life. They worked the ranch by day, preparing for winter, but the weight of the upcoming fight hung over everything. At night they sat up late, rehearsing testimony, anticipating questions, building their case from nothing but truth and determination. Tom Brennan visited twice, offering to testify on their behalf. Other neighbors stopped by. People Elias had never met who'd watched Mara survive alone for 5 years and respected her strength. The support helped, but it didn't erase the fear. The night before the hearing, Elsie couldn't sleep. She crawled into bed between Mara and Elias, something she hadn't done in weeks. "I don't want to go to Uncle Waylon's house," she said quietly. "He's mean and it smells bad, and there's no Solomon." Mara stroked her daughter's hair. "You're not going there, baby. I promise. But what if the judge says I have to?" "Then we fight the judge," Elias said, "and we keep fighting until you can stay home where you belong." Elsie looked at him with those 2 old eyes. "You won't leave? Even if it gets hard?" "I won't leave. Not ever." "Promise?" "I promise." She settled between them, small and warm and trusting. Eventually her breathing evened out into sleep. Mara met Elias's eyes over their daughter's head. Their daughter. Not just Mara's anymore, not just a legal arrangement, theirs. "We can't lose," Mara whispered. "We won't." But lying there in the dark, holding a child who'd already survived too much uncertainty, Elias made a silent vow. If the law failed them, if the judge ruled against them, he'd take Mara and Elsie and disappear, run so deep into the mountains that no one would ever find them, live off the land, off the grid, whatever it took. He'd lost one family to forces beyond his control. He wouldn't lose another to legal technicalities and corrupt men. The courtroom was packed. Half the town had turned out, drawn by gossip and spectacle. Waylon sat at the front with his expensive lawyer, looking confident. Mara and Elias sat across from them with no representation except the truth. Judge Morrison called the court to order, his expression grave. Waylon's lawyer went first, painting a picture of manipulation and fraud. Elias Boone, abandoner of property, suddenly returning when financial pressure mounted. Mara Whitlock, unwed mother with no legal standing, desperate enough to enter a sham marriage for protection. A child being used as a pawn in property disputes. It sounded damning, even to Elias's ears. Then they called witnesses. The county inspector, Margaret Holt, testified about her findings. Evidence of cohabitation, but questions about the marriage's authenticity. A banker testified about the property's value, making it clear this wasn't just about family, but about money. Waylon himself took the stand, playing the concerned relative beautifully. He spoke about Elsie's need for stability, for proper education, for the kind of life only money could provide. He never mentioned the ranch directly, but the implication hung heavy. Finally, Morrison looked at Elias. "Mr. Boone, you want to testify?" Elias stood, his heart hammering. "Yes, Your Honor." The oath was administered. Elias settled into the witness chair, facing a courtroom full of judgment. "Tell me about your relationship with Mrs. Boone," Morrison said. And Elias did. He told the truth, all of it. About coming back to find Mara living on his land. About lying at first, protecting himself instead of being honest. About watching her strength, her determination, her love for Elsie. About making a choice to stay instead of run. "Did you marry her to protect property rights?" Wayland's lawyer asked on cross-examination. "I married her to protect her and her daughter from men like Wayland Griggs." "So you admit it was a strategic marriage?" "I admit it started that way. But marriage changes you. Living with someone, sharing their life, watching them parent their child, it changes what you feel." "Convenient feelings," the lawyer sneered. "Real feelings," Elias said firmly. "The kind that make you want to be better than you were. The kind that make you fight instead of run." Mara testified next, and she was magnificent. She didn't hide her past, didn't prettify her circumstances. She spoke plainly about arriving pregnant and alone, about surviving when everyone expected her to fail, about building a life from nothing. "Do you love your husband?" Morrison asked. Mara looked at Elias. "I'm learning to." "We both are. Love isn't always lightning strikes and fairy tales. Sometimes it's two people choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Then they called Elsie. The girl was terrified, but she walked to the witness box with her head up. Solomon taught courage in every step. Morrison's tone gentled. "Do you want to live with Mr. Boone?" "Papa," Elsie corrected. "His name is Papa." "Do you want to live with your papa?" "Yes. He's kind, and he teaches me things, and he doesn't make Mama cry like Uncle Wayland does." "And if I said you had to go live with your Uncle Wayland," Elsie's lip trembled, "then I'd run away. Me and Solomon would go to the mountains and never come back." A ripple went through the courtroom. Morrison's expression softened further. "Nobody's making you run away, child. I just need to understand what you want." "I want to stay home, with Mama and Papa and Solomon. That's my family." Morrison dismissed her gently. Elsie ran back to Mara, who gathered her close. The judge was quiet for a long time, reviewing papers. Then he looked up. "I've heard compelling arguments on both sides. Mr. Griggs makes valid points about stability and resources. But the law also recognizes that a child's welfare isn't just about money." He paused. "I've reviewed Inspector Holt's report. I've listened to testimony, and I've watched this child make her preference abundantly clear." Wayland leaned forward, anticipating victory. "The marriage between Elias Boone and Mara Boone is ruled legitimate. The adoption of Elsie Boone is finalized. Mr. Griggs's petition for custody is denied." The courtroom erupted. Wayland shot to his feet, furious. "This is a farce. They've played you." "One more word and you'll be held in contempt," Morrison said coldly. "I've made my ruling. The Boone family stays intact." He looked at Elias and Mara. "But understand, I'm trusting you both to make this work. To be the family you've claimed to be. If I find out this was a deception, I'll reverse this ruling myself. Clear?" "Clear," they said together. Outside, the winter sun was bright. People crowded around offering congratulations, but Elias barely heard them. Mara was crying, Elsie was chattering excitedly, and the weight that had been crushing his chest for weeks finally lifted. They'd won. Wayland pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, Boone. I'll appeal. I'll find another angle. You'll leave my family alone," Elias said quietly. "Or next time we meet, legal consequences will be the least of your worries." Something in his voice must have penetrated, because Wayland's bluster faltered. He looked at Mara, at Elsie, at Elias standing between them and any threat, and whatever he saw made him take a step back. "You'll regret this," he muttered, but the fight had gone out of him. He left, his lawyer trailing behind, and Elias knew with certainty that Wayland was done. Men like him only fought when they thought they could win. Take away that certainty, show them real opposition, and they folded. The ride home was joyful. Elsie sang songs she'd made up, making them laugh. Mara's hand found Elias's and stayed there. And when the ranch came into view, it looked different somehow. Not just property or shelter, but home. Real home. That night, after Elsie was asleep and Solomon had taken his guard position, Mara and Elias sat on the porch despite the cold. Stars burned overhead, countless and clear. "We did it," Mara said softly. "We actually did it. You did it. You survived 5 years alone. I just showed up at the end." "No." She turned to face him. "You showed up when it mattered most, and you stayed. That's what counts." Elias pulled her closer, and she came willingly, fitting against his side like she'd always belonged there. Maybe she had. "I was thinking," Mara said carefully, "about what you said, about building this at our own pace. Yeah? I'm ready to stop keeping distance, to try being—" She struggled for words. "Being actually married instead of just legally married." Elias's heart hammered. "You're sure?" "I'm sure I want to try. I'm sure I trust you enough to be vulnerable. I'm sure—" She looked up at him. "I'm sure I'm falling in love with you, Elias Boone, and that terrifies me, but I'm done letting fear make my decisions." He kissed her then, properly this time. Not for appearances, not for witnesses, just for them. And she kissed him back with equal parts hope and fear and determination. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Mara smiled. "So that's what that feels like when you mean it." "Yeah," Elias managed. "That's what it feels like." They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside. That night, the space between them and bed closed completely. Not with urgency or desperation, just with the quiet certainty of two people choosing each other. Choosing to build something real from the ashes of everything they'd lost. Winter settled hard over the valley after that. The ranch became an island of warmth and activity in a world of white. Elias and Mara worked side by side, their partnership deepening from necessity into genuine collaboration. They learned each other's rhythms, anticipated needs, moved together like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. Elsie thrived. She grew taller, louder, more confident. The fearful edge that had shadowed her slowly faded, replaced by the ordinary fearlessness of a loved child. She bossed Solomon around, helped with chores, asked endless questions, and filled the house with noise and life. One morning in early spring, Elias woke to find Mara already up, standing at the window watching the sunrise paint the valley gold. "What are you thinking?" he asked, coming up behind her. She leaned back against him. "That I spent 5 years fighting to survive. Fighting to keep this place alive when it should have died. Fighting to protect Elsie from a world that wanted to take her away." She paused. "But I'm not fighting anymore. I'm just living, and I forgot how good that feels." Elias wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on her head. "You know what I'm thinking?" "What?" "That I came back here looking for graves, for the past, for a way to bury what I'd lost." He turned her to face him. "Instead, I found a future, found you, found a reason to stop running and start building." Mara's eyes were bright. "You're getting poetic in your old age." "I'm 42, that's not old. It's not young either." But she smiled, took his hand, pressed it against her stomach. "Especially not for what I need to tell you." It took him a moment to understand. Then his eyes went wide. "You're pregnant, about 2 months along." She watched his face carefully. "I know we didn't plan this. No, it complicates things, but—" Elias kissed her, cutting off the worried words. When he pulled back, he was grinning like a fool. "That's not complicating things. That's completing them." Relief flooded Mara's expression. "You're sure, because raising a baby is—" "I'm sure. I'm completely sure." He pulled her close. "We're going to have a family. A real one. Not built on legal papers or necessity, but on choice. On love." They stood like that, holding each other as the sun rose higher and the ranch woke around them. Somewhere outside, Elsie was talking to Solomon about breakfast. Chickens clucked. A horse whinnied, the ordinary sounds of a life being lived. Later that day, working in the garden, preparing soil for spring planting, Elias found the spot where Elsie had discovered the locket. He knelt there, his hands in the earth, and for the first time in 5 years, thought about his first family without crushing grief. They were gone. That was truth. But they'd left something behind, this land, these bones in the ground, this space that had been empty until Mara filled it with life. Maybe that's what survival meant. Not forgetting what you'd lost, but making space for what could still be found. You okay? Mara asked, seeing him stopped there. Yeah. Elias stood, brushing dirt from his hands. Just saying goodbye to some ghosts. For good? No, just goodbye to letting them run my life. He smiled. Figure they'd want me to be happy, to build something new instead of mourning what's gone. Mara took his hand, dirt and all. Think they'd approve? Of us? I think they'd approve of you. Strong woman who rebuilt everything they lost, who made life bloom where death tried to take root. He squeezed her hand. Yeah, they'd approve. That summer they planted the garden together, Elias, Mara, and Elsie, with Solomon supervising. The beans climbed higher than ever. Sunflowers nodded heavy heads. Squash sprawled across tilled earth like they owned it. And in that garden, in that valley, on that ranch that had died and been reborn, a family grew. Not perfect, not unmarked by loss or pain or the hard edges of survival, but real. Beautifully, messily, courageously real. On a warm evening in late August, Elias sat on the porch watching Mara and Elsie weeding the garden. His wife, and she was truly his wife now, in every sense that mattered, was showing with the new baby, moving more carefully but no less determined. Elsie chattered non-stop, explaining to Solomon her theories about why carrots grew underground while tomatoes grew above. The scene was so ordinary, so perfect in its imperfection, that Elias felt his throat tighten. 5 years ago, he'd lost everything and thought his life was over. Thought the only option was to run, to disappear, to let the past swallow him whole. But the past hadn't swallowed him. It had brought him here, to this moment, to this family that shouldn't exist but did anyway. Mara looked up, caught him watching, smiled. And Elias smiled back. No longer afraid of the future, no longer haunted by the past. Just a man, in a valley, with the people he loved, and the life they were building together. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one stubborn, beautiful, imperfect moment at a time.